Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Rossi, Chairman of the Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission. I would like to call this public hearing to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Michael Rossi.
Here.
Alan Kravitz.
Here.
Chris Anistovich.
Here.
Gary Bousquet.
Here.
Mary Ellen Dahlgren.
Here.
Michael Hughes.
Here.
Bethany Knight.
Here.
Andrew Richards. Not present. Amon.
Here.
Missing.
Thank you.
Jeffrey Cashman is
Present but not seated.
Adam Ward.
Here.
And Patrick Sheehan.
I will be seating Adam for Mr. Richards. And we have a quorum. This meeting, you have a secretary of the legal minutes.
Town of Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission, Andrews Memorial Town Hall, 54 East Main Street, Clinton, Connecticut, 06413. Town of Clinton legal notice of public hearing. The Town of Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, September 5th, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the green room of the William Stanton Andrews Memorial Town Hall, 54 East Main Street, Clinton, Connecticut, to consider the following. 1. SE-18-026. Special exception application for proposed farm under section 27.1.44 C, 66 River Road, Jeffrey Cashman, map 3, block 2, lot 75, zone R80. At said hearing, all persons will have the right to be heard and written communications received. The application and accompanying maps and correspondence are available for public inspection in the land use office of the town hall. Michael Rossi, Chairman, Town of Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission, emailed to the Harbor News Conspiracy Times on Thursday, August 23rd, 2018, Thursday, August 30th, 2018.
Thank you. Okay. Before we hear from the applicant, I would like to ask our attorney, Mr. Slater, to address some concerns that were raised previously and just to give us some instruction.
Yes, for the record, Ken Slater. Just wanted to reiterate, now that we're in the public hearing, that there are some proposed requests for waivers and excusals as part of the application. Your regulations allow for that. It's not uncommon that zoning regulations would allow for that. There's a case that would not allow, called McKenzie, that would not allow a waiver of the substantive requirement, like I'll let you have 2 feet of setbacks, but I'm going to make you have 6 feet of setbacks. But when it comes to application materials, whether you need everything in every application, there are ordinarily provisions like yours that say that perhaps, as the applicant will assert, that there is no need for a lighting plan because the lighting is not changing, or no need for an architectural plan because we're not proposing a new building. What I had suggested during the meeting before tonight's hearing is that you shouldn't make any rulings on that requested waiver or excusals until after you've heard the presentation of the applicant, after you've heard from the public on the entire application, not just the recusal, excusals, and waiver, but the entirety of the application. At that point in time, the commission's ready to close the public hearing. My recommendation is that you can have a vote on those particular waivers and excusals, for the reason that if you agree with the request and you grant the waivers and excusals, then the application materials are complete. Doesn't mean you'll approve the application, but the application is complete in that respect. You could then close the public hearing and then go ahead and deliberate whenever the commission is ready to deliberate on it. If, on the other hand, say, for example, there's one of the several requests for waivers or excusals that the commission is not comfortable with and thinks that the applicant should provide that information. If you do it before the public hearing closes entirely, then what that would give you the ability to do is keep the hearing open, move it a month, and then allow the applicant to make an effort to provide that additional information and not have to start the process all over. It's certainly your prerogative, if you choose to, you can just close the public hearing, take up the waiver and excusals after the public hearing is over. But if, using my example before, for some reason there's a discussion and the commission believes that a lighting plan is required, the applicant couldn't, after the public hearing is closed, submit a lighting plan. So the reality would be a new application would come in with that new information, and you'd have to start the process over, a new publication, new start of the public hearing. So if you wait to the very end of the public hearing and do it, I think that is a good procedural way to give everybody an opportunity to make their case as to why they shouldn't be done, but also give the commission the opportunity, if it so chooses, to keep the public hearing open to allow for the additional information. The other thing I handed out, Mr. Downs and I were participants in the subcommittee meeting, which was for the purposes of evaluating the completeness of the application and to be able to make a report to your commission. And a couple of legal issues came up during the course of that in terms of some of the interpretations of some of the regulations. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, whether you want to comment on those now or not. So I submitted, though, that a letter this afternoon outlining a couple of the legal issues. One of them is the question is raised, you have a regulation that says that you shouldn't be able to get a site plan approved if there's an outstanding violation on your property. And does that preclude an approval of this application, because obviously there's been a finding and a decision in the courts that there was a violation of the zoning regulations? In my view, what that regulation is intended to do is to make sure that there aren't aspects unrelated to the application for a permit from your commission that are in violation on the site. I'll give an example. If I wanted to put up a retail development on my site, and I have an illegal building in the back of my property that I built in the middle of the setback, or for whatever reason is not legal, then I need to take care of that before you're going to give me approval for my site plan. But if my site plan application proposes getting rid of the illegal building as part of the overall plan, it doesn't make any sense that you have to deny the application because my application proposes to get rid of something that's illegal. So, and another thing that can often come up, somebody doesn't realize they need a permit, they start doing something illegally, zoning enforcement officer issues an order that says you can't do that without a permit. The way to get that cured is to file an application for a permit and come before the commission or before the ZEO, whatever the case may be. So if your commission interpreted that regulation as not allowing an applicant to come in and apply for something to correct a violation, I think that would be bad precedent. It would prevent us from being able to resolve situations in which an application is necessary to cure a problem. That doesn't mean you need to approve it or will approve it. That's obviously your discretion in evaluating it. But I do not believe that section of the regulations that says that there must not be a violation of the regulations prevents a person from applying to correct that very violation. There is another section of the regulations that came up yesterday in the discussions, and that is you have in this, I won't cite it specifically, it's in my letter, but in the chapter of your regulations that talk about accessory uses, there's a provision that says that all that livestock need to be kept within buildings, stables, or enclosures, and that those enclosures need to be outside of all setbacks. And one question is raised is whether or not that applies to fences. Now, before I talk about that very briefly, I'll point out that you had another section of the regulation that specifically says that if it's part of a farm, that is, the farm is the principal use, that section doesn't even apply. So there is no requirement for the enclosure. Now, obviously, most farms, there will be some enclosures or building stables, etc. But the requirement that you must have one doesn't apply to farms. So if ultimately the commission concludes that this is a farm, and the commission ultimately goes to approve it, then that provision regarding the enclosures doesn't apply. Now, if it was considered an accessory use, which is typically a residence wants to have a chicken or wants to have a horse or something of that nature, that regulation, in my view, but it's your regulations to interpret, but in my view, that clause that says things must be in building, stable, or enclosure is meant not to deal with fences, but to deal with having animals, when they are accessory uses, they have to be a place where they can be kept indoors. And the use of the word enclosure was to, in my view, incorporate things that might not qualify as a building. I use an example in my letter. Maybe there's a portable chicken coop, something that can be moved around to be able to keep the chickens in. Well, that probably doesn't qualify as a building, but that would be a way in which those animals could be kept inside. So in my view, when you read the three words together, and in the context of that section, I would interpret that regulation as not applying to fences. And I would add to that fences are typically placed on boundaries, and your regulations in a variety of other land uses in town would not prohibit the placement of a fence within a building setback area. So I think that's another reason why that's the way I would interpret it. But going back to what I was saying before, if you ultimately conclude that it's part of the principal use, that is a farm, then that section doesn't even apply. You don't even need to deal with defining or understanding what the word enclosure means. So I just wanted to lay that out at the outset, and if there's any other questions in terms of my recommendations of the procedure, I'd be happy to answer them now, and obviously we'll be here and can be called on at any point during the proceeding.
I have one question for him. So if we did deem it to be a
Mr.
farm...
Chairman, I have a point of order. If I may, I provided a correspondence earlier today requesting the disqualification of 2 of the members of the commission before they participate in this hearing process or in any aspect regarding this application. I think that matter needs to be determined as to whether or not the 2 individuals are going to be seated for this application or going to disqualify themselves.
Okay. Would you like to read the letter that you presented?
Sure. Thank you. I think that I just wanted to do this at the appropriate time.
No, that is the
Didn't
appropriate
mean to
time.
interrupt,
One of
but...
the gentlemen that you were asking to himself had a question, so this is the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Edward Casella for the record, representing Jeffrey and Patricia Cashman. And I guess another point of clarification is, are we in the public hearing? Has the public hearing been opened, or are we still preliminary?
Yes, it's open.
Public hearing is open. Just wanted to make sure. We submitted a correspondence earlier today asking that 2 of the members of the commission, Gary Busquet and Adam Moore, disqualify themselves from hearing this application because we believe under General Statute Section 8-11 they need to disqualify themselves because they have either a personal or financial benefit or detriment, so to speak, in hearing this application, as those terms are laid out in the statute and as they're further defined in case law. With respect to Mr. Busquet, he's the owner, upon information and belief, he's the owner of Grove Gardens Landscape Center and Grove Gardens Landscaping. Part of the operations at Grove Gardens includes production, manufacturing, as in the sale of mulch. And we all know one of the main reasons that we're here today is the Cashman's request as part of their agricultural and farming use to be able to produce and sell mulch. And this includes people coming to the site to pick up mulch and the delivery of mulch off-site to other properties. And these are 2 of the services that Grove Gardens offers at their facility on Boston Post Road. Therefore, we believe there's a direct business conflict, so to speak, between Mr. Busquet and his operations at Grove Gardens and what Mr. Cashman is trying to do, which raises the question as to whether he can reasonably and fairly decide this application. There doesn't need to be a direct conflict. There just needs to reasonably be a question as to whether or not approving or denying a certain application could inure to his benefit. And the fact that he provides the exact same service in the exact same town, where there's not a lot of other operators who do these things on this level from a wholesale perspective, we believe that is a financial conflict of interest. With respect to Mr. Moore, upon information and belief, Mr. Moore's sister-in-law, Kristen Cafferty, lives right next door to the Cashmans at 70 River Road. My understanding that Mr. Moore's wife, Heather, is Kristen's sister. So there's a direct familial relationship with the property owner next door and one of the members of the commission. And even if the Caffertys don't have any objections, One of the considerations that this commission needs to make under special permit is what the impact are on adjacent property owners. It's in your regulations, whether it's going to impair their value, whether this use is in harmony, directly impacts, potentially, positive or negative, what's happening next door. So we believe that that is a personal conflict of interest due to the familial relationship, and that he should step down for those reasons and not participate in the public hearing or the deliberation process. Further, there's been some preliminary discussions at the initial meeting, I believe on July 9th, a subsequent meeting on August 13th, where these two individuals have expressed the desire to deny the waivers outright without even hearing what we have to say. So we additionally believe that that is prejudging what we're coming in to ask, without even hearing why we want a waiver of the landscaping plan or the traffic plan or the other plans. They've said we should deny those. So there's also a prejudging implication in our request for them to disqualify themselves as well. Thank you.
Gentlemen, I need that, if you are going to recuse yourself from this application.
I will not be. I'd like to state for the record, I do not produce or manufacture mulch. I'd like to state for the record, I do not produce or manufacture recycled wood chips. I also have never once, and it was interesting that you didn't use an example, never did I predispose myself towards any of the waivers.
Well, I think that is a not waiver. Okay. Thank you, Joan. You had a question for Mr. Porter?
So if we were to deem that as a farm, does the resident become accessory to the farm?
No, they're both, the permitted use in the zone of a residential use is authorized, is legal, so that doesn't change. Someone who wishes to have a special exception use, that's what you're permitted to be the farm. Although, I mean, most farms people reside on, so we're probably splitting hairs on that one. But I think either way, whether you just treat it as a unique, we're approving the farm, the existing house exists because it's a residential zone and it can exist, or whether you approve improve the farm as including a farmhouse, I don't think it really makes a difference either way. That it would be authorizing the regulations.
Mr. Chair, can I ask Adam, would you just give a reassurance to the public about that seeming impropriety?
No.
Is it appropriate?
It's not appropriate.
Okay. Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Will we have an opportunity to ask Mr. Slater questions after we hear the presentation?
Yes, I was planning on doing
Right,
that.
thank you very much. Okay, I prefer to wait at that time.
So Attorney Slater, so my question is just for the fact that the property itself and the zoning, if we change, I'm talking on the town side, if we're putting ourselves at risk, if we're changing the zoning of a property without notifying the current lender on the property?
You would be changing the zone. This is an application, your regulations authorize the use as a special exception use. So the application is to have your commission issue that kind of a permit. The general statutes say there's certain kind of uses that you're automatically allowed to have, and those are in your list of a P beside them. But then the general statutes also say there can be classes of uses that are permissible in the zone, that are generally considered something that can go in the zone, but you evaluate on a case-by-case basis as to whether they've been appropriately cited, the aspects of protection of the neighborhood, things like that are considered in its appropriate location for the particular use. So it wouldn't be a change of zone, it would just be authorizing something that's permitted under the regulations.
Thank you. At this time, is there any correspondence that will be before the applicant facilities?
7 Deerfield Drive, Clinton, Connecticut, 06413, September 1st, 2018, to the Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission. We are friends and neighbors of Veronica Lopez, who resides at 69 River Road in Clinton, Connecticut. We are also residents of the River Road residential neighborhood. We are frequently on her property, and we have observed the following. 1, Veronica's house is directly adjacent to her neighbor's barnyard. The barnyard contains goats, chickens, usual cattle. The smell is very objectionable, as are the swarms of flies from the manure that is either left to decompose or mowed with the grass and just spread around. The area has unusual barnyard sounds. Farmers usually place their barnyard well away from their house, as has the owner of the adjacent property. He placed it next to Veronica's house. 2, the adjacent property has numerous vehicles and pieces of industrial equipment parked on the property. It resembles an industrial site more than a residential site. 3, the owner of the adjacent property operates a mulch production and distribution business in a residential area. The site creates noise from the machinery and the constant heavy traffic that delivers wood for the process. The decomposing of mulch creates gases that are both objectionable in smell and cause your eyes to water and burn, which could be a potential health hazard and environmental contaminant. Groundwater in the air as we breathe. The decomposing mulch, which presents a fire hazard from spontaneous combustion. Our neighborhood is a residential neighborhood, and for the enjoyment of our property and the protection of our property values, we must keep it residential only. The property adjacent to the north of 64 River Road and owned by John Cashman devalues her property and has made it impossible for her to sell. No one wants to live next to a barnyard and commercial business in an area that has been zoned for residential only. The barnyard, mulch business, and heavy truck traffic affect the property values in the area as well. If the special exception is granted, other similar exceptions will also have to be granted. We expressly desire that this property, 66 River Road, is not granted a special exception, SE 18-026, for use as a farm or industrial site, and that it remain as residential only. Sincerely, Homer Wilson and Cheryl Fulton.
Is there an agent or applicant to present? I'm sorry, we
Emails from the fire department.
Yeah, we got an email from the fire marshal also, I'm sorry. Fire marshal's office has no concerns at this time with this application. Respectfully, Jeffrey A. Hesser. Thank you, Mary.
Okay. All right, just to follow up on the conflict of interest question, if I may, for a moment. We didn't hear from Mr. Moore as to whether or not he's going to disqualify himself.
He asked an answer.
Asked an answer, okay. And Mr. Bosquet, in his response, stated he doesn't produce mulch. Part of what's requested to be happening at the Cashman farm is selling mulch, having customers come pick it up and deliver it to off-site activities. I believe those are part of his operations, upon my belief. So I would like to at least hear what his response is to that aspect of it, not just the production and manufacturing of mulch, but also the sale, the availability for it to be picked up on-site, and also the delivery to customers.
Eric, you would-
Well, that wasn't part of your original
Yes, it was.
question. Grove Gardens has been around since 1951. We do not manufacture or produce any mulch on site. Of course, first of all, yes, we sell mulch. I do not sell recycled wood chips, and I do not have a conflict of interest. I've never purchased recycled wood chips. I don't sell recycled wood chips. So I hope that answers your question.
Do you sell mulch where people, if I may, Chair, through yourself?
I would rather.
I think I would like to be able to get these facts into the record, and I'm not sure there's another way to get
Grove Gardens
other
buys mulch
than
and
asking
sells mulch.
questions as a commission member.
Stop. Go ahead.
Thank you. Do you have mulch does Mr. Busquet have mulch available to be picked up at his location in bins on the property at Grove Gardens?
You're asking him or me?
I'm asking through the chair.
Through here.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And does Mr. Busquet deliver mulch to customers by using their vehicles?
My vehicles or customers' vehicles?
Your vehicles.
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. And again, this is exactly what Mr. Cashman is proposing to do. Direct competition from a business perspective, so we renew our objection to Mr. Busquet's being seated as part of this application. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Moore, I think, goes without saying why we believe there's a personal conflict of interest with respect to him being seated and hearing this application. Okay, well, now we're going to start over. Edward Casella, 29 Elm Street, Cloutier and Casella attorney, representing Jeffrey and Patricia Cashman with respect to property at 66 River Road, Clinton, Connecticut. We've provided a number of materials in our initial application and in a follow-up application materials as well, so we hope to lead you through those materials so that hopefully you have an understanding of this application, what's sought to be done on the property, and the reasons why we believe it's in compliance with your zoning regulations as they relate to the residence district and the permitted use of residential and the special exception use of farming and the sub-use of farming for the production and sale of landscape materials, including mulch, manure, firewood, etc. We understand there's a few kind of big picture issues that I think it makes sense to highlight, some of which Attorney Slater has already given you a bit of a heads up on, and as we go through the application materials, we will continue to provide you with the reasons why we believe the waiver should be granted, number one, and ultimately why we believe the special exception application should be granted, number two. So the first issue I think we just need to tackle and get on the table is the question concerning the waivers that are being requested at this point in time. So we can provide at least a preliminary glimpse as to why we believe the waivers are warranted in this case, waivers or excusals are warranted in this case, and then as we go through the application, if there's any further questions regarding what we're seeking to be waived or excused, we can provide that information. So I draw your attention to your regulations, section 4.64, because that's the section from which we're requesting the two waivers, and then later on in that, in section 4, 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, there are also waivers of some specific plan materials. So 4.64 involves two waiver requests. The first is we're requesting a waiver for adding 2-foot contours to the plan, okay, which is required under your regulations in certain circumstances. And we're requesting a waiver of locating all the existing trees on this property that are 18 inches or greater in diameter. The preface language in 4.64 I think is very important because it outlines when and if you think this type of material is actually needed in an application. We've requested waivers to be conservative, but you may decide it's not even needed. Site plans for applications which involve alterations to the site shall include the following information. This is direct from your regulations. Or have a note stating that the following features are not present or proposed on the site or do not apply to the application. Okay, so you kind of give yourself a menu of different options there as to whether or not 2-foot contours and putting every tree on the plan are even required. Okay, so just make sure you keep that in the back of your mind, because the first thing it says is site plans for applications which involve alterations to the site require 2-foot contours and require showing trees. Our position, and I think you'll hear, there's no alterations to the site that are being proposed. The site is what it is, has been operating in a similar capacity for 30 years in a lot of respects. And really, the site plan depicts what's on the site and how the site is going to continue to be operated. If Mr. Cashman was going to clear the rear of his property to do more activities, then perhaps these things are warranted, because you would then want to see where the contours are, what the existing grade is, what the proposed grade is, where the trees are, how many trees are being removed, how many large trees are being removed. That's not the case here. And this is the reason why we believe a waiver isn't even maybe necessary, because it doesn't involve alterations. This application doesn't involve alterations to the site. The application involves basically trying to seek approval, special permit approval, for what's been going on the site for many, many years, since they purchased the property in 1987. The next group, and again, I just want to outline this for you so you can hear when we're going through our presentation, make sure that you understand where we're coming from. The next group are 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, 4.10, which are architectural plans, lighting plans, traffic study, landscape plans. And in each of these sections is similar language where you can excuse the requirement for professionally prepared architectural plans, or excuse the requirement for lighting plans, or excuse the requirement for traffic plans. So architectural plans, starting with this, for all proposed building structures and signs shall be submitted. There are no proposed building structures or signs. The building structures and signs are already on site. Okay, so that, again, whether this needs a waiver or it's not applicable, we don't think architectural plans are required. Lighting plan. Lighting plan shall show all exterior lighting fixtures, photometric characteristics, certification. The only lighting on this property is lighting that's involved with the residential use. There's minor lighting around some of the farm areas, but the lighting is not significant. So that's why we're requesting the lighting plan be excused. A traffic study, same thing. Traffic, the operations on this site have been occurring for many, many years. It involves the residential use of the property, which is the Cashmans coming in and out. It involves contractors bringing wood chips to be dropped off at the site, and it involves customers coming to the property. And landscaping plan, again, there's no proposed changes to the landscaping plan. So to the landscaping that's on the site, the landscaping speaks for itself. I have some photographs when we go through the site plan. We can show you what's involved with the existing landscaping and what's going to be continued as landscaping. So again, that's just a bit of an outline of the waivers and or the excusals that we're requesting. Soil erosion control plan 411, I neglected to list that, but it's here. Again, this site, there's no new impervious surfaces going on the site. This site, other than the buildings, is all either gravel, mulch, or wooded area. Okay, yes, there's buildings, there's miscellaneous buildings in the front, there's vehicles and trailers that are used for the farm operation, but the stormwater serves in the same capacity that it has served for many years. So again, we don't believe a specific soil and erosion control plan is done because there's no alteration of grade. There's no grade changes that are going to require making sure that soil isn't eroding. Yes, there's the operation on the top of the hill which involves mulch, but it's a self-contained, and the land is all graded to drain down the slope and not onto the adjacent property owners. So again, that's the basis for the waivers and excusals that we've put forth in our application materials. The next topic, just again, big picture questions here, is Attorney Slater alluded to this, the question of whether enclosure applies in this instance. And again, I think we need to draw your attention to the regulation which is potentially at issue here, which is section 28.1 involving the keeping of livestock as an accessory use. So again, section 28, take a look at the language. This is what defines this provision of livestock use. And the question for you is, does this apply to this application which requests special permit, special exception for the use of this property as a farm? Accessory use is an additional use for which a zoning permit is required. Shall be accessory to a permitted use. Shall be located on the same lot with the permitted use. shall include the following standards. Okay? Again, our position is that farming is not an accessory use, it is a dual principal use. And so this section 28.1 in the regulations that apply to livestock in it don't apply to this application. If I was coming into you with a 1 acre property and asking to put a cow on it, this would apply. Because you have in your regulations, in your definition of farm, there is a 3 acre minimum for a property to be even eligible for special exception as a farm. So that's the key distinction here as to principal use versus accessory use. To keep chickens on a 1/2 acre lot, to keep horses on 1.5 acres, those are accessory. Due to the size of this property, 3.5 acres, we have the ability to come into you with this application as a principal use, and these don't apply. Again, all the buildings need to meet zoning, and the buildings do meet zoning, and they have met zoning. The second aspect of the argument related to enclosure goes back to some of the language in your old regulations where that term enclosure was used. So your regulations right now in your definition section have a provision that where there is an ambiguity, is this activity a farm? Is this area an enclosure? You are supposed to make that determination. It says it right in your regulations. The commission is supposed to make the determination, not the zoning enforcement officer. Unfortunately, in the past, the zoning enforcement officer made determinations without coming to you and asking, is what he's doing, is that a farm use? Does that fall under agriculture? Are these cows in an enclosure? Is this what you meant? No, didn't happen. Unfortunately, we know what happened. He didn't appeal. He didn't go to ZBA. And he could never present a defense. We're beyond that. But I think it's important to look at your old regulations, because when he purchased the property, and in later versions of the regulations, as late as 2004, a building was defined as an enclosure for the keeping, right in the definition, and it's in the packet that we submitted, an enclosure for the keeping of people, persons, animal, or property. So building was defined as an enclosure for keeping of persons, animal, or property. So an enclosure was a building, but all of a sudden, the zoning enforcement officer made the determination otherwise, and it led to a 6-year odyssey, which leads us here today. Now, trying to meet the zoning regulations and coming to you and asking you for a special exception application, forgetting what's happening in the past, but being guided by some of the missteps and the determinations that were made in the past that led us to where we are today. So, give me 1 minute here. One of the ironies here too is, and again, we provided a chronology. In 1993, the Cashmans were brought to the Zoning Commission. And the Zoning Commission determined that the nursery was a principal use, and that he could have vehicles, commercial vehicles, that were related to the farm because it was a principal use. Read the minutes. There's a specific provision in these 1993 minutes. It's my exhibit that I provided for you 4, where the commission made a determination that the nursery use that he had at that point, which is a farm, nursery and farm, was not an accessory use, and therefore the accessory use regulations did not apply. So we're asking you to continue with that trend that the commission has done, and that the accessory use regulations don't apply. Okay? So now we'll look at what are the uses that are being requested, and how does the site plan relate to the uses. We've provided a statement of use, which for the most part speaks for itself, so I'm not going to read the statement of use. And we'll go through several of the highlights of the site plans just to orient you all, and I have some photographs, as I said before. So the property, River Road North, Hammonasset River, and the houses that abut the Hammonasset River are across the street. So as you're coming up River Road, the property is on your right. The main feature of the front of the property is the frame house, which is the existing single-family residence. The main driveway into the residence is the gravel drive. There's a garage in the rear of the property. This is the single-family use. There's parking depicted on the plan. Septic system is depicted on the plan. That's the residential component of the use. The farming component of the use has two separate operations for the most part. The first is the keeping of the livestock, which is in the eastern portion of the property, the southeastern portion of the property. There's a barn, holding area, chicken coops, feed shed, proposed corn crib, proposed farm stand, a sign, fencing, different vehicles and trailers that directly relate to the farm use. For example, the tractor trailers that you see on there all store hay. There's some photographs of that. That's the southeast portion of the property where under the farming, under the agricultural use, there's housed, present time, cows, goats, chickens, there's one pig, rabbits, other livestock. The rear of the property is related to the production, processing, manufacturing of mulch and landscape materials. If I can, I have some photographs of mainly of the rear of the property. I can walk you through these just to orient you on the site as to where the different activities are. Perfect. The first photo shows the bin, the trailer for hay, and the shed is looking in a general easterly direction. You can see the top of the mulch area, the berm in the mulch area here. So all of this here on the left-hand side of the photo is the vegetative buffer that separates the mulch activity and the residential property owner to the east. This is standing at the top, staying on the east. So here's the berm, and here's the woods, looking in a kind of northeasterly direction as it goes around. Next photo, looking directly east. That's all the vegetation that's on the other side of, you see the top of the berm, so to speak, and the berm is becoming vegetated. Here again, in this picture you can see the bins. You can see the garage. This is the corn crib that will be moved to the front. And now you're looking up toward the western portion of the property, and you can see the existing vegetation that's there. I think, again, one of the reasons we're asking for the waiver of the landscape plan and the trees is you can see all the trees that are here on the property. This is at the top of the hill in this area here. Vehicles parked right inside this portion, and there's the neighboring property owner to the west. This is looking now down south. And again, you can see the vegetation, the denseness of the vegetation that's on this property in this, what we call brushed, wooded area to remain. This is looking straight back. This last picture with the red dump truck here. Straight back, up. Can't even see the exposed ledge because it's covered with vegetation. Okay, so that gives you an idea of, in particular, the vegetation and the buffers that are surrounding the existing and proposed work area for the mulch operation. The two activities, the farming activity, namely the keeping of livestock, and the mulch processing are governed by state agencies. Okay? And we've provided in our chronology, and Exhibit 14, Exhibit 17 are Department of Agriculture inspections of this property that have taken place over the years. So you can see Department of Agriculture comes out, takes a look at what's going on with this 3+ acre piece of property, and gives an opinion that the livestock keeping use, the livestock keeping component of the farm use meets with standard agricultural practices. Additionally, we've provided correspondence from the DEEP regarding the grinding, the first grinding of wood materials into chips to be made into mulch. Okay, that is a permitted use under DEEP, and we provided the best practices manual for that as part of the application materials. So those activities are governed, again, not only by yourselves and your zoning regulations, but also by independent state agencies. I have another packet of photographs that show the landscape potential of this property. These are what the farm looked like several years ago. And you can see many of the buildings. These photos are primarily taken right in the front along River Road. And show how the Cashmans kept up their property for many, many years. And I think it's fair to say that they're looking forward to getting back to this level of keeping up their property once, hopefully, all these issues are behind them. Give me one moment, please.
There's somebody back there who could get the lights on the village report. The light, the back lights there.
Your zoning regulations, definition of farm, as it's been amended, has, like I said earlier, has one of the main components is property has to be at least 3 acres And the second incorporates the state of Connecticut definition of agriculture in the zoning regulation. So I just wanted to provide what that definition is. It's under 11Q of the Connecticut General Statutes. And this goes through what the state of Connecticut deems to be agriculture and what your zoning regulations now deem to be agriculture. I think it's important to run through the zoning regulations that apply to farms where there is a specific request, as in this instance, to receive approval for the production, processing, preparation, and storage of horticultural commodities, including compost, mulch, manure. These are section 12.38, the standards that are required under that provision. They include the keeping of livestock that must be done in accordance with standards set forth by the Department of Agriculture. And they have specific sections related to the production, processing, preparation of mulch and other materials. Number one, there must be a 35-foot setback from the activity from any residential property. There's a 35-foot setback line that's depicted on the site plan. It needs to be a 100-foot setback from any well or water body in which water is taken. There's public water on the road that serves the residences, is that correct?
Yeah.
And there's an agriculture-only well that's depicted on the site plan that's not used for human consumption. Preparation or processing of compost, mulch, manure take place between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Deliveries of materials between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. We're willing to comply with those time requirements. 25-foot vegetative buffer along property lines that abut residential uses to reduce noise emanating from the preparation and processing operation. Again, we've provided the brush lines and also shown photographs of the amount of vegetative buffer that's in existence along the property line. Production, processing, preparation, storage of horticultural commodities shall not exceed the area of 15,000 square feet. And the area that's on the top that is involved directly in the production, processing, preparation, and storage does not exceed 15,000 square feet, and that includes the bins where the materials are being housed for sale. I hope that gives you a good overview of what the application involves. Myself, Mr. Cashman, Mrs. Cashman are available to answer any questions if anything needs to be clarified. Again, we're asking for you to take a look at a few different things. The first is the waivers. If you don't want to grant the waivers, we'd like to hear from you about that so we can respond. But we believe that the waivers of 2-foot contours, trees over 18 inches, landscaping plan, lighting plan, traffic study, sedimentation and erosion control plan. Again, we believe most of those are not applicable to this use. One thing I did note is this commission does grant waivers and has granted waivers in the past. I know from several applications that I've been involved in, there's been granting of waivers, but I tried to find something that was a little bit more on point. And I found from a public hearing last July 7, 2017, there was a farmer's market on Killingworth Turnpike that received approval from this commission, and lighting plan and traffic study plan were not required. And you have the minutes are available to you all. That is the minutes dated July 10th, excuse me. The public hearing was held on the 5th. The minutes are dated July 10th. And there's a farmer's market that involves a similar amount of activity. Lighting plan and traffic plan were not required in that application. So there is precedent for not granting such things and are not requiring such things in this instance. Again, we thank you very much for your attention and listening and being receptive to what the Cashmans are trying to do on their property and what they're trying to seek approvals for. Again, please ask questions. We want to know what the concerns are, if any, and hopefully they can be addressed. But, you know, this is a 3.5 acre property. It's eligible for a farm use, and that's what we're requesting to be allowed. That's what they had when they purchased the property in 1987. They got tax assessor approval for it, and all of a sudden it became an accessory use, and it went downhill from there. And they didn't appeal, and they had no hope. 15 days went by, it's over. That was the end of it. And it was a determination that the zoning enforcement officer made incorrectly. You should have made that determination, not him. So now the regulations allow for this. The regulations specifically allow for all of the activities that they're requesting that have been going on this property for many, 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 many years before many, if not all, of the neighbors even came into this neighborhood. This is a very unique situation from a zoning perspective. He puts a cow on the property on August 11th, the regulations change on January 1, and an enforcement letter goes out on January 26th. Think about that. Think about that for a second. How is that fair? It's not. And we couldn't defend it. And then a letter goes out in April, he doesn't appeal, he tries to work it out. Nothing can be done. Thank you. All right, so again, please, we want to be able to answer any questions that you have. I know Mr. Cashman would like the opportunity to answer anything that you have, specifics regarding the use, the hours, the intensity, the lighting. If there's anything further that you think we need, you know, we'd like to be able to provide it to you so that you can fairly and fully decide this application. Okay?
Thank you. Our tradition is to first hear from the public and then have the commissioners ask their questions. So I'm going to stick with tradition on this. The first, we ask for people who are in favor of this application to speak. Then those in opposition. Finally, we'll hear from those with general comments. I want to remind everybody, though, that we're talking about this new application and its uses only. Okay, so make sure that what you're doing is providing us information pertinent to this application. Okay? And if I think something is off track, I'm going to make sure that I stop you. Okay, so I don't want to hear anything that's a personal attack against anybody. None of that is acceptable. I hope I'm clear. Okay. So those in favor of this application who would like to speak, do we have a sign-up sheet?
Yeah.
The sign-up sheet's on the podium. Please step up and sign. Actually, I should say print your name so we can read it. We did have trouble with the last one with not being able to read things. So print your name and address so we can read them. And then you may present your evidence.
Could we have this pulled back, please, this tripod, please?
Out of the way?
Yeah, just go back a little. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, go ahead and state your name for the record, please.
Hi, I just want to make sure, can everybody hear me okay? No. I'll just speak. Sure. My name is Heather Rose Cashman. I reside at 66 River Road for my entire life. These are my parents here. And I'm a newly registered voter here in the town of Clinton, which is pretty exciting for me, to participate in things like this. I'd like to give a small presentation, but it's not going to take too much of your time, I promise. So I'm just going to pass out something just so you can reference it. I am president of the Manabassa FFA chapter at my high school in Middletown. FFA is more commonly known as the Future Farmers of America. I'd like to point out to you tonight the group of students behind me in these blue jackets, and some not, seated right here and behind me over here. These are just some members of our large chapter in Middletown, and they're here in support of this application as well as myself. And I'm sure many will speak to you tonight, but at school we're taught one really important thing, and that's that we have the obligation as students and as a future for agriculture to advocate for what is right. That being said, I would like to humbly ask for your vote to approve this application for farm status of Spruce Hill Farm at 66 River Road back into effect. I myself have actually been reading up on some of these documents to get a better understanding of the things that I hear my parents talk about and the things that are important and what may be holding it back, what may be making it, enhancing it. And I've come across some points that I would like to bring to the public's attention as well as the commission. One of them is in the zoning regulations, section 1.4, which I didn't provide for you because you have access to that, I'm sure, and it's online for anybody who'd like to see that. But that describes the regulations, it describes the purpose for having the regulations set in place and also for having this commission, which is deeply important because you guys do a lot of cool work for this town and you guys get to help families out, and that's really neat to me. It specifically mentions, though, at the end of section 1.4, the following: and to promote the economic and operational viability of agricultural businesses, farm operations, farmland protection, and maintaining community character. I was actually relieved when looking through this to find this specific wording added right in there, considering that Spruce Hill Farm is qualified for all of the above. A town that takes time to be diligent like this in protecting those businesses is a town that is a town and a community that the members and the citizens here are going to trust. So that was really important when I found that, and I was impressed by that. I've also had the chance to review our town's history of approved plans of conservation development. I heard that term a lot in my house, and I wanted to know what that was, so I took the liberty of looking that up. And I looked up all of the previous ones until the recent one, including the recent one, and they're clear about protecting farms, and what was clear to me was historically established viable agribusinesses. The property in question meets every definition of those things. The only thing left to do here is really to finalize that and put that back into Clinton public record. I urge you to consider these facts that I presented and the documents that I've given you, and include those in the decision-making process of our firm. Upon further research, I would also like to point out that according to the Connecticut Department of Agriculture, farming is not deemed a nuisance. I've included a copy of each of these documents for each member of the commission and for the commissioner, Mr. Rossi. I myself have always loved agriculture. Even when I was not aware of all the things that it had to offer me. I can remember when I was not even 2 years old. It was funny that I was thinking about this the other day. I first fell in love with my stuffed animals, which is kind of funny. But you think back to that when you're little and some of you may have kids, but I remember falling in love with my stuffed animals, sleeping with each of them so they didn't feel left out. And when I was in 5th grade, I got my first cow, and I will tell you, honestly, I spent every waking minute with that cow, probably more than I should have. Should have probably done some more homework, but let's be honest, it's a cow, and it's really cool. And I've grown to love them. They're my favorite animal in the whole world. And he honestly was my first love. And he and my dad have taught me an awful lot of lessons. I will tell you that for sure. Like to double check your work, even if it means getting up and making sure you really did close the pasture gate, because that got chaotic. And that you should always be on time, especially to morning and afternoon feedings, but even to things that are important like tonight or just to school. And basically what I'm saying is the farm that I have and the life that I've been given is nothing large, nothing rich, in a lot of people's eyes. But, I mean, if we're being honest, really, who really loves cleaning up manure every day without fail? It's a lot of work. Well, whether or not you see it, I do. Because it's for a cause and for the people and the animals that I hold dear and the things that I value in my life, and that I strive to communicate to the members of our chapter. I strive to communicate to you tonight, and I strive to communicate to the public. It is been my pleasure, my honor to speak in front of you today. As a resident of Clinton and a newly registered voter, an advocate for agriculture, and a member of the largest youth-based educational organization in the United States called the FFA. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please sign in. If you're waiting, you can still come up and sign up ahead of time.
Good evening. My name is Keegan Evelyn. Excuse me. I am a resident of Clinton, and I also am in support of this application. I would like to read to you tonight a statement from the National FFA organization, of which all of the members, some are included behind me, live and hold dearly to their heart because they are a member of this organization and this type of lifestyle, of which I can present to you a copy of. So the FFA Creed is what it's called.
Oh, wait, is this applicable to this application? It's the, I mean,
She will further explain how this is applicable.
I believe in the future of agriculture, with the faith born not of words but of deeds, achievements won by present and past generations of agriculturalists, and the promise of better days through better ways, even as the better things we now enjoy have come to us from the struggle of former years. I believe that to live and work on a good farm or to be engaged in other agricultural pursuits is pleasant as well as challenging, for I know the joys and discomforts of agricultural life and hold an inborn fondness for those associations which, even in hours of discouragement, I cannot deny. I believe in leadership from ourselves and respect from others. I believe in my own ability to work efficiently and think clearly, with such knowledge and as skills as I can secure, and in the ability of progressive agriculturalists to serve our own and the public interest in producing and marketing the product of our toil. I believe in less dependence on begging and more power in bargaining, and in life abundant and honest enough wealth to help make it so for others as well as myself, in less need for charity and more of it when needed, and being happy myself and playing square with those whose happiness depends upon me. I believe that American agriculture can and will hold true to the best traditions of our national life, and that I can exert an influence in my home and community, which will stand solid for my part in that inspiring task. My relationship with the Cashmans has been a really reaffirming relationship in which my future for agriculture has been inspired. And thank you for your time.
I'd like to point out this is exactly what I was talking about as something that does not specifically apply to this case and this application. I mean, it's very nice, but it is not addressing or providing any evidence related to the application. I want to please ask people to just present evidence to us, not statements of general joy of farms or concerns about how many chickens there are. Okay, we want this to be evidence-based only. Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Kathleen Herman, and I am from Ontario, New York, which is located in the middle of farmland. My involvement in referencing the application is that for the last 47 years, I have come down and spent time in Clinton and on the farm with Jeff and Patty and the family. My family would come with me. We have watched them build the farm up, not all of those years, but when they were there, landscape it, have it be a place where friends and family could come and enjoy the space and enjoy the time together, but it was impeccable. I have never smelled, I do not care for barnyard smells, and I've never had a problem. I don't live there, but I've slept there, and I've slept in the yard in a tent, and I did not have a problem. I'm not saying that there will never be an odor that drifts up when the wind blows. I'm just saying that it was not a hindrance in whether I wanted to be around the farm. The thing that really strikes me is how much Patty and Jeff over the years were invested in the town of Clinton, far more than I have been. However, their most prominent part of that was in using the land that they had to be welcoming and to be involved in their town. The rest I will put aside because it was really only my experience staying on the farm and being exposed to what they made of it.
My name is Derek Babineau. I'm owner and operator of Middlesex Tree LLC. I'm a Connecticut state licensed arborist. I've been dumping wood chips for many years at the Cashman farm. And when you have a local place to dump wood chips, you can, be more aggressive with your pricing. You can price lower, so it's good for the community because we don't have to go a long way from there, from that neighborhood, from that area of Clinton, to dump, which means we can be in and out of the job faster, which means lower costs for, the homeowner. So it's a great location, and I think it's helpful to the community to have affordable tree service.
Hey, my name's Kenny Glenn. I'm co-owner of Top Notch Tree in town too.
Sir, can you speak up? I didn't hear you.
My name's Kenny Boylan. I'm co-owner of Top Notch Tree in town as well. I've been dumping chips at Jeff's house for quite a few years. As far as the cleanliness of the place, I mean, it doesn't get any cleaner. There's never been a smell, anything like that. And, some of the things I've noticed during this meeting, as Heather was speaking, there was only like 3 of you guys that were even looking at her. But not hearing what the kid wants to say. These are some of the nicest people in town, and it kind of seems like, they've been targeted and railroaded. It's just not right. But as far as everything that they do at their farm, there's never any ton of traffic. It's clean. The people that live next door, they moved in knowing there was a farm there, so it's kind of a neat thing. But thank you.
Hi, my name is Pam Dixon, and from 1991 to 2013, I was the secretary of the Department of Public Works in Clinton. And as such, one of my many duties was doing purchase orders, ordering supplies, and things like that. And one of the supplies was mulch and topsoil. Jeff came to our aid several times, Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Irene, helping with equipment and manpower to help clear the roads. He's been an integral part of the town of Clinton and helped tremendously. Without people like that, we would be lost because we had very few people at the town of Clinton back then. What happens is we pull from local people. We try to keep things in town. And as such, Gary will attest that we've used him before, we've used all other companies before, and Jeff has never let us down and had topsoil, and whatever we needed, he was there. Thank you.
Did you already sign in?
I did sign in, thank you. My name's Trent Fox. I'm a veteran of the Armed Services. I served in law enforcement for 29 years, worked hand in hand with many of Clinton's finest over the years. I currently live in Madison, but for years I lived at 15A Souls Point Road, paid taxes here in Clinton. As a matter of fact, this very commission granted me a waiver for aggregate land cover, because on Souls Point Road, there's not a lot of land down there. I had more children, so I had to relocate. I love Clinton. I still love Clinton. Matter of fact, I've been going to the church over here since 1991 when we moved down here, and that church has been here since 1797. Let's give a little history. Known the Cashmans since we came to town, and I've been going 56 River Road for about that same amount of time. I'm respecting your words, Mike, about keeping this how you want it to be kept, because being a detective sergeant and seeing how investigations go, how definitions and people with animus can really do some horrible, hurtful things, and I'm editing so much you don't even know, because I respect you all. I bought Christmas trees at Grove Farms, just, you know, Grove. I bought Christmas trees over there. What I've seen this family get put through, for what? I can't even comprehend. Travesty and tragedy doesn't even come close. How something like this could happen in an awesome town. All these towns were farming towns back in the day, and were shipbuilding towns. The heritage that we have here, the fact that Yale started here, there's so much history. I can't believe, and it is so wrong, what has happened with this family. This is the edited version, highly edited version. I'm going to go to your positive talking points, Mike, just for you. What I've learned from that farm, so many things. I had no idea about the incubation process to fertilize eggs and have baby chicks show up. Only time I saw baby chicks was when I was at the Big E. Anybody ever been there to the Barn Center? Seen all those chicks popping out at different times? I've brought my kids there. I've been at the Cashman farm when there's been parents lined up with their children to go see all the animals on their farm.
May I ask how this applies to this application?
How? They're filing for a farm permit. You're the chairman. You know that, certainly.
Educational.
This is all farm related. So I don't even understand what you just said. Families lined up with little children with the biggest eyes, so excited to hold a baby goat, a baby chick. Endless animals at this wonderful spot where these people show and cultivate love and provide experiences and interactions for, I know one of the moms who goes there, she's a foster parent. She takes all these kids who don't have anything in Connecticut, and they come down to their farm and show kids, sadly, whose parents had an addiction and they were taken away, what it is to be at a farm and see brand new little animals. How to feed them. One of the greatest things that's come out of this farm and this location, got to be this Heather Cashman, who's lived there her whole life. She told you herself. Lived there her whole life, and loved animals and been on that farm her whole life. But you know what's great about Heather and about Jeff, and I hope you didn't miss what Ms. Dixon said. This guy has given more to this community than anybody I know, and didn't get paid to give what he got. Whether he was driving up and down with Christmas stuff going on or anything else, honestly, I'm at a loss at what this family's been put through when they've given so much to a specific town and lived here. But I digress. To go back to Heather, and as she's grown and watched her grow on this farm and bring other kids from VOAG and everywhere else that she's been around and watch them experience, I'm talking shovel chicken poop on a farm, sweating their butts off, learning what it means to work ethic, love, getting up early, doing all those things, that is invaluable. It's all about giving back to the kids. You guys have a chance right now to right an incredible wrong. I'm not getting to the law part of it because I respect you, but you know. And I challenge you now, all of you, to do the right thing, to see the evidence of all the great things that have come out of that farm and should come out of that farm in the future. Thank you.
I'd like to state my name for the public record. I am Margaret Goulet, and I reside in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. I have known Heather Cashman for the last 3 years of my agricultural education. As you notice, I have a gold pin on my jacket. I'm the first place winner for poultry production in the state of Connecticut. Woo! Also diversified agricultural production. Who it really should have gone to was that girl sitting right there in that blue jacket. I called her just last week in almost tears when I said that one of my chickens needed impromptu surgery. The vet would have costed me over $400. That girl said, no problem, I'll stay up. I'm done with homework, come on down. I drove here for 45 minutes and that girl was right there with open arms, ready for me and my little baby chick. Now, I first met Jeff and honestly, he hugged me. I've never been hugged by a stranger, but it kind of felt really good. I know he's always there for guidance, whether it's how I said to the town of Rocky Hill, let me keep my chickens, please. They're the reason that I'm #1 in this state. They're the #1 reason why I'm going to Indianapolis to represent the state of Connecticut, including your town, the whole state. I'll be there October 23rd through the 28th representing your state. So, I'd like to thank you for listening to us. It's just nerve-wracking even standing up here looking at elders who my mom always taught me, as long as you do it with kindness, they'll respect you. They'll respect your knowledge. So, I ask you everything in my heart for Heather and I, for the 129 students at Middletown High School's vocational agriculture program from the entire Middlesex County, including Rocky Hill, that you please pass this application so I can keep going to Jeff and Heather and Patty anytime I need to, just so I have open arms to go into and have them wrap around me in love and support of my agricultural adventures. Thank you.
My name is Judith Gainhurst, and I just have a few little things I'd like to talk to you about, and it revolves in the dictionary. I looked up the word farm, and there's 14 different definitions of a farm. I'm going to read you number 6. Farm, a piece of land with a house, barns, etc., on which crops or animals are raised. I believe that Mr. Cashman meets that for this property. Thank you.
Just to be sure everybody is signed in who's spoken?
Yes. My name is Joyce Allen. I live here in Clinton, and I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Cashman, not by choice. My husband flagged him down. We had a snowstorm, and we had 2.5 to 3 feet. We had been out there, we are seniors, And we were there for 3 hours shoveling and never got one car out of the driveway. My husband flagged him down. He stopped what he was doing, and he came in and he completely plowed my driveway for us. Now, I've never met this man before. I had no idea who he was. And we have since become very good friends. I have been to that farm. I've been there in the morning, in the afternoon, the evening, late evenings. I've dropped things off for them because I was concerned that they didn't have any food for holidays. And they're nothing but the nicest people you ever want to meet. And they deserve to have their farm the way it should be. Thank you.
My name is Kyle McAuliffe. From my personal experience, I've seen that this farm has benefited this community so much. I've gotten so much experience from like my FFA program at Middletown High School, and this farm has only exemplified the benefits from it. There's so many opportunities. I've seen like what was mentioned before, like work ethic, getting up early, just like general skills that you don't get from many other places. And I've noticed that it would benefit the community so much. Like as stated in the zoning regulations, that it would benefit the community in like all agricultural promotion. Thank you.
What was the signage you were saying? I didn't see. I'll sign it as soon as I get through. Hi, I'm Pam Fritz. I'm president of the Clinton Taxpayers Association, and I have a couple things I'd like to say that I think are really pertinent to this issue. The Clinton Taxpayers Association definitely supports the application and the approval of this application. Farms in our town are a vital part of our community, and historically our town has encouraged farm operations. And I'd like to specifically address the issue of the fact that our town has made provisions for farms for the easement of their taxes to encourage farming. Farms that qualify enjoy reduced property taxes, as well as tax exemptions on equipment used for farming purposes. And I know this has been very true with the Cashman Farm as well. But the Cashman Farm also has been inspected through the years. Again, it's been around a long time and has passed those inspections. The Cashman Farm has every year done what it's supposed to do and has declared what farms must declare as part of their properties, etc., and their equipment, etc. So the Cashman Farm has been functioning in this town for many years with all the proper criteria, okay? I want to just make a note right here and now. There are some businesses in this town that have qualified themselves as farms, but they don't grow anything, they don't function as working farms, as the Cashman Farm does, and they also use their equipment for things that have nothing to do with farming. The equipment that Jeff Cashman is using has to do with farming and qualifies for legal tax exemptions. So this is the case with the Cashman Farm, and it's been working since 1987. Now, in those 31 years, there are many people that I know are disturbed about the neighbors of the neighbor area, but a lot of those people weren't there. It's an existing farm that existed since 1987 and a working farm. The Planning and Zoning Commission, since it started in 1963, and I had a few notes and things that I found, clearly understood the importance of farms and agricultural businesses. So the restoration of Jeff Cashman's farm is very critical to our community. It sets a precedent, and I think we should stick with that precedent because it's very important. I want to say, as the Taxpayers Association, we have spent an awful lot of time. A large amount of taxpayers' dollars have been used for court issues, and we know that for sure, and it's not making the taxpayers happy to do that, believe me. We think that on this particular one farm application has been spent. I also want to point out there has been very apparent negative, some self-serving arguments by some members of this commission, which is not really, in my opinion, in order for proper order regarding this particular application. Mr. Cashman, I think, and I have known what he has done to try to satisfy the commission and satisfy the farming regulations. I know what he's done. I think he's done everything he possibly can do. There's nothing more that should be done except to restore his farm status. He has rights too, just as these other businesses and towns do, and this town does. Thank you.
I'll sign in after I even get the sheet. My name is Richard Anderson. I'm the owner of A&L Tree Experts. We're based here in Clinton. We pay taxes here in Clinton. I'm here to support Jeff and his family's application for the agricultural use part of the application, and of course the farming. We don't have any place to dump chips in Clinton. In Madison, you can dump chips at the landfill. That stopped many, many years ago in Clinton. Having Jeff's place has been very helpful to us. We look for places all over the shoreline, and he needs to make money if he's in farming, and he can make money doing wood chips, turning them into mulch. It's hard to make a living as a farmer. There's no farms left anymore. They're going away like crazy. And it's part of our heritage, like many other people have said. So I'm just here to support him.
Is there anyone else who wanted to speak in favor of this application?
I'd like to speak, Mike.
This will be brief.
My name is Harriet Stein. I live at 6 Mohawk Drive. And what I want to say is the first time I ever went to the Cashman property, I really didn't know that I was going to a farm. I thought I was going to somebody's property for some other purpose. And while I was there, I heard a cow. And I said, you know, if I didn't know any better, I'd swear I heard a cow moving. And that's how I found out it was a farm. There was absolutely no mess, no smell. It was, if the people next door were complaining that what was happening at the farm was so objectionable, I don't know, you know, maybe the wind was blowing in another direction, because certainly it wasn't evident to me. And furthermore, so many farms now in Connecticut are folding for economic reasons. We should support what we have. We shouldn't allow this to happen. And if Jeff has to have a mulch business to maintain his property and to maintain his farm and to keep his farm so that when Heather is ready to take over, the farm will still be there.
Jeff, you're the applicant, so I've heard that you wait until we come back to the applicant portion. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application? Okay, in that case, I now would open the floor up to those who want to speak in opposition to this application as soon as the sheet gets back. So we've got the sign-in sheet back. Somebody who would like to speak in opposition to this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Tim Shields, 20 Water Street, Guilford, Connecticut. I'm here on behalf of Veronica Lopez. She is the abutting property owner at 64. Chairman, if I approach for a moment, please.
Yes, you can. But I've had a request to take a 5-minute break, okay? So if we could take a break. Go ahead and hand those out, and we'll get there. 9:04, we will take a 5-minute break. Okay, it is 9:11 and we've returned. Let's see, make sure I get this right. Mr. Shield, I believe you were speaking.
Yes, Your Honor, just to clarify for the record, as we took a break there when I first came to the microphone, Timothy Shields, 20 Water Street, Guilford, Connecticut. I'm here tonight on behalf of Veronica Lopez, who is one of the abutting property owners at 64 River Road. Just as we took a break, I handed the chairman and the rest of the commission a written memorandum, so to speak, of our objections to the application. I felt that it was important to do that tonight, just to make sure that the record is clear for one thing. A lot of times, as we just saw, we sometimes have some technical difficulties in the recordings. So we just want to make sure that everything is captured. I'm going to try and touch on a couple of key points this evening. Unfortunately, I'm going to take a little bit of a different view of some of the regulations that were discussed earlier tonight by both town council and counsel for the applicant. One thing I want to point out is, and this is very specific, is that the commission sits here tonight authorized with the powers given to it by our statutes as well as the zoning regulations. You must decide this site permit application, special exception application this evening based upon the town regulations as they are. As was mentioned by both town council and the applicant's council, there are certain provisions for the waivers of certain requirements and excuses for certain requirements within your regulations, specifically in section 4. One of the key things is that every time that there is such a provision, it is specifically laid out in the regulations that you have the authorization and power to make that waiver and make the determination of whether or not it's that specific provision is required as part of the application. One thing that I want to point out to you is that section 4.16 is the requirement that all applications for special exceptions shall include the following information. 4.16.1, a current certificate of zoning compliance demonstrating there are no zoning violations existing on the property as of the date hereof. That was alluded to by town council. That provision cannot be waived by this commission. It is mandatory that that is a part of your compliance package and as part of the application. As I said, the commission cannot grant a waiver and excusal of that provision. In our opinion, that makes this application incomplete in one of several other ways as well. We heard a lot of talk tonight about enclosures. What's an enclosure, what's a fence? I think common sense needs to rule here. By the definitions that were given already this evening, the enclosure would seem to be satisfied in this situation really because there's a barn on the property. If the definition of enclosure in your regulations doesn't include a fence that would encapsulate the animals within the property, we would have animals running amok around town. The fence and enclosure is part of this regulation. Okay? As a matter of fact, it's set forth specifically in the provisions dealing with farms in section 12.38.3A and B, as well as in section 28.1.H. Also, part of that is a requirement that a report be given from the Connecticut Department of Agriculture. I did not see one, but I query the applicant if such a report was ever generated and submitted with this application.
We can ask them that at a later point.
Well, the reason why I bring it up is, again, because it goes to the completeness of the application. And that report also is referenced in your regulations as being the defining factors to the density of the animals and livestock on the property. if that report is not part of this packet, I don't see how the commission can make an informed determination as to the appropriateness of this specific application in harmony with the rest of the neighborhood, which is required to do. Part of what I submitted with my objections is a copy of the memorandum decision from the court case that was brought by the town as an enforcement act several years ago. And the reason why I brought that is not to bring up bad history, things of that nature, but to point out some deficiencies with this proposed site plan. That proposed site plan that's been provided here lacks a lot of specificity. The requirements speak to the site plan meeting the requirements of an A2 survey. What you have before you tonight, in which in certain instances is permissible in your regulations, you can allow it, are handwritten drawings on that site plan depicting the location and size of buildings, of setback lines. What it doesn't do is provide accurate distances and measurements as to the setbacks, as to the locations of those buildings in relation to the setbacks. Those are specific requirements that are required. And the reason why this is key is the court in the enforcement action determined that the property as it sits violates the setbacks, violates the 35-foot setback. The enclosure in the front where the animals are kept violates the front setback and the sideline setback. So for the applicant to submit that application with the presentation that was made tonight is very questionable in my mind as to whether it's true and accurate. One of the things that is required, and this is part of the standards that is required for approval of a farm under Section 12, is a 25-foot vegetative buffer. Attorney Casella has pointed out that there's a reference to some brushy area on the map. He pointed to photographs and things of that nature as well, which not all of us have the pleasure of seeing, just because of the way these proceedings are done. I do have a couple of photographs as well that I'd like to submit to the evidence tonight too. These were taken by a friend of Ms. Cashman and her husband. She's here this evening. They were taken over this past weekend. They're aerial photographs of the Cashman property. I'm going to orient the photo in my mind's eye as to the way it should be. I apologize, this is the biggest I could get these blown up. The copy place wasn't able to get them any larger without distorting them. But essentially, the way I have this oriented is north to south. Okay? The Cashman property is depicted here. This front area here is the enclosure, the pasture where the animals are kept. Back here is the mulching area. When I pass this around, the commission can note my client's property is right here. There is her driveway. There is a metal fence that runs along on the property line between 66 and 64 River Road. If you extend that all the way back through the property, that property line matches up almost with the dirt berm and the mulch material that is currently on the property. Attorney Casella spoke this evening about the vegetative buffer. Well, the vegetative buffer that is over here to the right side of the berm area is on my client's property. There is not a 25-foot vegetative buffer on the subject property, which is required under the standards for the special permit to be issued. Also, the mulch material is within, as the court determined, the 35-foot setback, as well as the enclosure in the front where the animals are kept. One of the things that's also occurred, unfortunately, I don't have a good photo of it, but you will see in the photos, and Attorney Casella pointed this, he may have a better picture. Behind the residence, there is a small, long building, which is known as the corn crib. That building was brought to the Cashman property in April of this year. Mr. Cashman sent an email to Eric Knapp, the former zoning enforcement officer, asserting to him that that corn crib was not going to stay on the property, it was going to be moved to Westbrook.
I unfortunately don't have a copy of that email, but that information will be, it is in your email system and can be retrieved by the town. Mr. Cashman has kept that corn crib here without a permit in violation of the regulations. They've also presented tonight that that corn crib was going to be moved up to the front of the property. I think that just kind of demonstrates some of the behaviors of the applicant, which are germane to your considerations. There's been a lot of talk this evening about smells. I personally have been to my client's property within the past 2 weeks. The first thing that hit me when I stepped out of my vehicle was the smell. And standing and looking at the fence, I could see manure and other excrement along the property line. My client will testify tonight about the effects this has on her and her enjoyment of her property. It's not a pleasant sight. There are numerous trailers that are scattered around the property, numerous heavy equipment that's scattered around the property, all of which the applicant was ordered to remove from the property in 2015. I understand the applicant's before you tonight in an effort to try to come into compliance, but it seems to be a little late beyond. Some of the other things that the commission has to consider fall under section 11 of the special exceptions, and that is the use of the subject property and the various buildings and structures and whether they're in harmony with the residential neighborhood. We are the position they are not. It doesn't promote fair development of a residential neighborhood to this kind of intensive use in a residential neighborhood. My client will testify about how she has lost the opportunity to not only market but sell her property because of the conditions of the property next door and the conditions of the animals and things of that nature. One thing that you need to consider, and this was a waiver that was asked for by the applicant, and you'll have to make your decision on it, is traffic studies. My client will testify that there are numerous times when her driveway has been blocked by dump trucks lined up on the road waiting to make deliveries to the Cashman property. You have other safety concerns regarding the narrow roadway, school buses and things of that nature as well. You have to consider, I understand that there is a letter or an email from the fire marshal stating that they'll have any concerns regarding the property, but without having actual measurements from a surveyor, from an engineer on that site plan, showing you the precise location of the berm, showing the precise location of the mulch piles, and the distance between them, I don't see how this commission can make a determination that there's adequate access for fire equipment to get back there. Mulch is a combustible material. It is part of the process of the breaking down of the compost. It self-ignites all the time. It is an enormous fire hazard that is in the middle of a residential area. The other thing that you need to consider tonight as part of the waivers is the landscaping plan. As I said, the requirement requires a 25-foot vegetative buffer along all residential property lines. All around the entire property. That's your regulation. It's your word. There's nothing there to depict a vegetative buffer in the front, along the southeastern side of the property, where my client's front yard is, and her driveway is, and the pasture is that he contains his animals in. There's no vegetative buffer along the other side and the back ends of the property as well. That's one of the things you need to consider, but as part of the waivers, if that vegetative buffer is required, where's the landscaping plan showing how that's going to be put into the property and depicted on the site plan? Thank you.
I'm Ray Bernier. I live at 23 River Road. The gentleman before me brought up the subject of traffic. One of the things you really have to consider is River Road and its dimensions. I'm sure they fall within guidelines, and the yellow line down the street falls within guidelines of a highway or residential road. However, there are two significant curves to the south of the property that school buses can't negotiate. As we left for the hearing tonight, some of the campers were on that road. Now, campers don't travel in tents anymore. They travel in vehicles the size of commercial buses, towing vehicles behind them. The traffic coming up through there, and especially the people delivering wood chips at 4 or 5 o'clock at night, cannot negotiate those curves as is. So a traffic study is something you really have to consider. And I thought, and this is a question, that's the end of my remarks. I thought in previous hearings that under zoning for farming, that they were not allowed to import. Am I wrong? Import wood chips? I thought the farmer was allowed to sell compost, hay, anything that he produced, including wood chips. But it was my impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that a farmer could not import for commercial selling. Do you have an answer to that question?
I don't at this time.
Explore that, because I thought that came up previously. But the importing creates tremendous traffic on River Road, and there are two significant corners south of that property that the school buses cannot negotiate, neither can any of these trailer vehicles or even the wood chip deliverers. Thank you.
My name is Mary Wozniak, and I moved to Clinton in the year 2000. I live across the street from the Cashmans. When we moved there, their sign was Sprucey Hill Landscape, Nursery and Landscape. There were no animals there. I don't know when he became a farm, because I don't remember seeing farm on the sign. If you had that information, that would be good to clarify that. I also feel that the wood chips is a commercial operation. It's not a farm operation. And the reason why all the wood chip companies that come up to speak is in favor is because they would have no place else to dump their wood chips. Also, there was a comment from the fire chief in Clinton saying that there were no concerns at the time of application. I can see the wood chips, the piles, the mountains of wood chips, and they're steaming. The steam is coming up so high you could see it. It's a gray, blue steam. And to me, that's a fire hazard. So in my closing, I am in opposition to all the requests that are coming through. Thank you.
My name is Veronica Lopez, and I live at 64 River Road, adjacent to the Cashman property. My husband and I bought this property in 1989. When we moved in, there were no farm animals. There was no mulching being done. We bought this property, hoping to retire there. And in 1997, I retired from the military after serving 25 years in the service. Our retirement since then has not gone as planned. Living next to the Cashman property is very difficult. I open my front door and I get the stench of urine and manure. I get black biting flies that come into my home. I get the large black horse flies that I never had until the farm animals were brought in. I believe the mulching started in 2008. So when we bought this property, there was no business there except for landscaping and the nursery, but that was it. There are safety issues because any given day when you're operating, you will get between 25 and 35 large vehicles dumping wood chips on this property. They will be parked along the road and it becomes one-way traffic. I have had them blocking my driveway and I have asked them not to block my driveway when they are delivering the wood chips. They're lined up along the road and along his driveway. So there's many, many vehicles coming in and it's a safety issue for people that are walking, jogging, driving, because you can't see around these vehicles when they're parked and lined up. I have counted at least 15 companies that come to deliver wood chips. Not all on the same day, but 15 different companies. And they all aren't first grind wood chips that are being delivered. You see a lot of brush, you see branches, you see large limbs that are being delivered. Anyone that is clearing their property is invited to come dump whatever they're getting rid of on his property. It's not first grind, not always. It's noisy. The trucks going in and out all day, trying to make it up the hill, the backup beavers when they're dumping their load. I cannot enjoy my property the way I want to. While he's hosting cookouts for his friends, I have to sit inside my home because of the smell and the noise and the flies. And why can't I enjoy my property the way he's enjoying his? I had the opportunity last year to sell my property. And I think I'm pretty sure I had to buy it. But when he brought his wife around, she said, no way am I living next to that. And again, there was no farm there when my husband and I bought that property. My husband passed away in 2000, so like I said, my retirement there has not been the greatest. I can't enjoy my property. I can't do what I want, I can't sit outside, I can't entertain friends outside, because again, the smell and the flies. It's very, very detrimental, I think, to me, to not be able to do that. The fire marshal said that they have no issue with what's going up on the hill, but the mulching. But a few years ago, Fire Marshal Alvarino wrote a letter saying that there is a fire issue up there. I would like to know what has changed since then to make this a non-issue. Because you do see the wood chips smoldering, and you cannot get any emergency vehicles up there if there were to be a fire. It's also a safety issue for me because I walk my property sometimes. I have had Mr. Cashman push wood chips and mulch onto my property. He has pushed large logs onto my property. If I were walking there and I don't see it coming down the hill, I could be hurt, or anybody on my property could be hurt. So he does not take that into consideration. He has many, many vehicles parked on his property. At one time I counted at least 20. He had an old ambulance there, parked there. He had a fuel truck parked there. He has tractor trailers parked there. Many of the buildings he's brought in without permits. Also, the manure is not picked up on a daily basis, and I know that for a fact. You see it lined up along the property line. Those farm animals are closer to my house than they are to his house. They don't get the smell. They don't get the biting flies. I get all that. And the wind doesn't even need to be blowing for me to get the smell. I open my windows and I get the smell. I get the noise of the trucks going in and out all day. Why can't I enjoy my property? Why do I have to suffer? Why will my property value probably decrease because of what he's doing there? I just don't understand that. His corral is right up to my property line. There is no buffer. There is nothing. I hear the noise of the animals all day, every day. 11 o'clock at night sometimes, his rooster is crowing. His animals are crying. I hear all that. They probably don't because it's not next to their house. These animals are practically living in my house. They are so close to my house. And I just want to be able to enjoy my property the way my husband and I planned on doing when we bought it. And if you look at his property from my house, from my backyard, from my front yard, it is not well maintained. There's a lot of broken down vehicles. Anything somebody wants to get rid of, he will take it in. There is a lot of junk, and I have commercial vehicles parked right along my property line. And this isn't a dig, but it's a fact. It looks like a junkyard. It really does. My property, it's clean. I don't have a bunch of parked vehicles there. I don't have garbage in the backyard or the front yard like he does, but it is not well maintained. Maybe the front is, but when you look at the back or the side, it's not. So all I want is to be able to enjoy my property and get the chance to sell it, just like they want to run a business, a commercial business. You allow them to run a commercial business. Anybody else in the town who wants to do the same thing, anywhere, they should be allowed to do the same thing. What's going to happen to residential areas, property values? You know, it goes both ways. They want to enjoy their life. They want to have a farm. I want to enjoy my retirement. I want to enjoy my property. Thank you very much.
Anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Did you, by the way, did you sign in, ma'am?
Yes, I did.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Fullerton. My husband, Homer Wilson, and myself live at 7 Deerfield Drive in Clinton, Connecticut, which is a bluff. It's a bluff that overlooks River Road. Can see it directly during the time in the winter. I will attest that I have stayed at Veronica's house. I was house sitting, and therefore can attest to everything that she says. I visit her frequently and cannot stay outside on the porch at all because of what she says, the smell. And one time I was standing there and I said, my eyes are on fire, what's wrong? It was the wood pile or the mulch area. It was smoldering and the smell was a chemical smell. As a property owner, I do not want a commercial business in my property, in my area, in my residence. I didn't buy the property for it to be a commercial property. I want it to be a resident. So in the event that I want to sell, I don't want somebody to question, well, you've got a business and a large business going on the Cashman property. And the trucks are an issue. You can't walk barely on River Road. They do travel fast. That speed limit is 30 miles an hour. Very few people observe it, but with the big trucks, It's very much of a danger, and there's no easement. There's nowhere to go when these big trucks are on the highway, on the road. I'm very concerned in the fact that I want to visit my friend. I have to go inside. She can't enjoy her property. I can't enjoy and visit with her outside. So therefore, I feel that as a property owner, I don't want my property devalued if this exception is made so that everybody can open up a commercial business. It's the wood chips. It's astronomical. I can't believe when I look at it, it's like a mountain. It's not a hill or a mound. And the aerial view, it's ridiculous. I live in a residence. I don't live in a commercial area, and I didn't purchase my property for that reason. Thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to make general comments? Okay. This time then, I would ask the applicant or the applicant's agent to address the some of the questions about the setbacks that were raised.
Yeah. I think the most important response is what you have there in that site plan is a site plan that's necessary for zoning compliance. And if this application is approved, the statement of use and the site plan will be the governing documents regarding the uses on the property. And if what's happening on the property does not comply with the site plan or with the statement of use, there's a zoning violation. So if there isn't a 25-foot residential buffer, or vegetative buffer, excuse me, that surrounds the processing operation, or there isn't a 35-yard setback, again, from the processing operation, then the use of the property doesn't meet the site plan and is subject to zoning violation. Obviously, none of us want that. But that's the operative document, together with the statement of use, that defines how the property is going to be used moving forward in the event that this application is approved. And I'm going to have Jeff discuss a few things, and I know he wants to say a few items on his own as well. One of the things I did note in the materials submitted by Attorney Shields was the hours of operation on the statement of use may be inconsistent with the hours of operation that are allowed under Section 12 in the zoning regulations for delivery of materials. So for the record, the hours of operation for delivery of materials will comply with the hours of operation in Section 12.38.3, which is 9 a.m. To 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday. And if necessary, we can revise the statement of use to reflect that, but I just want to make sure that that's clear for the record. I think it's important when you look at Section 12.38.3, the standards and requirements, paragraph C is what's modified by 1 through 5. So paragraph C is the specific subset of the farming activity that relates to the processing, production, preparation, and storage of horticultural commodities, including mulch. And that's what's modified by the setback from not only the property line, but also the vegetative buffer. So it's our position that those numbers 1 through 6 don't apply to the entire property. They only apply to the specific use that's described, subset of farming that's described in paragraph C. We believe that interpretation is the clear interpretation of that regulation. I think at this point, I'd like to have Jeff address a couple of things. He's going to listen to me. To talk about the amount of traffic, the number of trucks that occur on the property, how the deliveries are controlled, okay, through your property. We've heard testimony today about dump trucks backing up onto River Road. Talk about best management practices for the mulch operation, including what is required to be done to the piles. And there may be more things, but I think I'd like to turn it over to Jeff at this point to address the commission.
It's Jeff Cashman, 66 River Road. I am the owner of Spruce Hill Farm. And I guess I have to be very careful in how I say or address the commission. I am a commission member. And I'd like to address some of the comments that were made tonight in the both positive and in the negative. At this time, I'd really like to say how proud I am of the kids in the FFA who come out tonight to be able to, it's a really proud moment for my family. We've been in the agricultural business for many years, and our intent when we bought the property was for it to have, or to raise a family on this as a farm. And when we first purchased the property in 1987, just to make it really perfectly clear, it was worked out in the workout committee, that there was a certificate of occupancy for the barn when we purchased it. And if you look at the dating on the blueprint, you'll notice that was designed when we bought the property. You'll see that the barn was existing before we even bought it. So when I purchased the property, there was already the same occupancy for the home as there was for the barn. And that's when that was dated, and the reason why the zoning department felt that we were not building any buildings at that time, and that this farm application already was certified because we weren't building it. Through the 30 years or 32 years that we've owned that piece of property, we have been compliant with all of your zoning regulations. We've been working with your zoning. You can find it in 610 documents. In the land use file, if you so chose to ask Torrance to go get the file, you would see all the numerous history for what we've been doing that's been compliant. I'm as gently as I possibly can, and as a gentleman, I'd like to dispute Mrs. Lopez's comment that when she bought the property there were no animals. I do have a video of 1990 when she moved in, which was only 2 weeks after she bought it, where the fencing and the animals were there. And if the commission wanted to so see it, the animals were there prior to moving in. And at the time she purchased the property, that property she bought had horses on that property at that time. We all in the community were enjoying the idea of knowing that the animals were there. I have photographs and I have pictures that would dispute that argument. We as neighbors took off the enclosure on her property that was used for those animals at the time for the previous owners, the Creasers. For the last 30 years, we have developed the farm. I work out there every day. It's been a nonstop 7-day-a-week operation. That's what farmers do every day. Through some previous history of doing some work on some other farms as a teenager. It was my desire and my wife's desire to buy the property because of the barn, because of the workshop, because of my mechanical ability. The vehicles that do come out are used. I do take used vehicles and turn them into agricultural purpose used vehicles. We have, for the unregistered vehicles that are on the property, I do own what's known as a transport plate, and I think Gary can explain that to you. What a transport plate is that those vehicles are registered with the assessor's office, and that we do pay a reasonable amount of tax on those properties, but when I do need a vehicle, I don't have to pay the registration and the insurance on it because I pay that through the plate, which is known to be able to transport it back and forth to where we use it. Today, we are privileged as a farmer to be able to take a trailer to the property where we do hay, and we do buy and purchase and sell hay to other people. That opportunity has come around to where it's nice as one older man to go back underneath the trailer and to deliver hay to our clients, and we do separate the hay that's in those 2 trailers. The 4 trailers that we have on the property, we offer several different kinds of hay on that property that we sell to different people. Some of that hay and those agricultural products that we sell are different than Gary has stated tonight. He sells agricultural products. He sells mulch on his farm operation that he has. He brings it in, he doesn't manufacture that mulch on that property, he brings it in, trucks it in, returns around and sells it. These agricultural products, it should come down to absolute common sense. That when you're sitting there taking a bale of hay and picking it up in the field for $3 or $4 a bale, you can turn around, charge it $7 for the bale to somebody in the middle of the winter time, and you can deliver it and put it in the barn and get paid for it. That's what farmers do every day to me. There has never been once, over 32 years, that I have ever stopped farming. I've stood firm in my defense in wanting to farm this piece of property. It has been our livelihood. It is what has paid our bills. It is what has been a desire. My failure, my personal failure, was to trust a zoning enforcement officer in a land use office, thinking that we were working with the land use office, getting that certification. That's what we were told. That's what we did. We instantly, the day that Mr. Lane was on our property, we moved animals. I explained it to Torrance Dennis today. We moved those animals in so that we could dispute the farm application that was on our property. I can't say anything more at this point about what happened to those documentations. Today, I'm a little bothered that an attorney could represent a client knowing the right to farm laws, that flies, odors, nuisances are protected from the original owner who was there prior and had purchased that property for the original intent. That right to farm law is there to protect people like us who desire to farm that piece of property so that new people can't come in and say, my life has been totally devastated and I saw it was a farm, I bought it was next to your farm, and Veronica's property is technically non-conforming because her garage and property and some of the things that she has is within 8 feet of our property. There are no setbacks because of when it was built. There was no zoning back then. It's sad you have a non-conforming piece of property called a farm. You have a non-conforming property called residence that's so close. It was never the intentions commission, the commission's intention, to have any of this from the very beginning when we bought this property. We used your land use office. We gained access through this piece of property legally. We gained access for every building that we moved. Everything that we did went through the land use office. My failure was to go to the zoning board of appeals. If someone were to say, Jeff Cashman, why did you not go to the zoning board of appeals? I instantly acted with a zoning enforcement officer, moved the animals up to what we call a sacrifice area. Torrance Downs was up there today. I was told just to get documentation. 87 days later, after the order to discontinue, the lawsuit started, and it was bad from then. I was misrepresented by your office. There was issues that we thought in trust with someone who worked with the land use office, that we were trusting going forward, that there was no need to go forward with the land use, and that's at that point. I need to make that statement.
Yeah, but you gotta stick to this application.
There is, this application I'm speaking forward to. We did have every zoning commission approval to have that farm/nursery operation on our property through planning and zoning, all approved, and it was ours as a matter of right. I lost that because I didn't go to the zoning board of appeals. We sit here today in all these applications and look for every attorney that wants a loophole. Your own attorney outwitted you in your own zoning regulations, and that to me I thought was really sad. We were honorably went to those people that we trusted in our community and thought we were doing the right thing, working with the state, and this is what turned it into a nightmare. And I apologize for having to be here today. I was certified. I was approved. I was approved. I've been doing everything legal by every standard in the book, every standard. And at this time, because I trusted, a legal loophole has now put us into where we are today. I apologize that Mrs. Lopez bought her property after I bought it. She willingly knew, and every person who was bought after my property has been working on that farm. We have been dedicated to agricultural support. We've been dedicated in agricultural work on that property. You can obviously see the impact goes to several from that little tiny farm in Clinton, goes throughout the whole state of Connecticut, and even folks who come from Pittsburgh who enjoy that opportunity to come out if you were to see the details of the families that come out for nothing and learn education and the thrill of knowing that they find, it's amazing that that is a little tourist area for all the other campgrounds. So I sit here today and I ask your commission, what's the worst offense here? We keep that as reasonably, wonderfully as we can. We do the very best as farmers. To me, the product that we have on top of our hill is a way of taking in, and we all know that was what's known from the DEP, that those chips, whether they be little, ground 3 times, ground 4 times, they're known in the industry as what's known as first grinds. Yes, there's been a load of rush that came in. We've had Mrs. Lopez, had to have the police department ask her to not trespass our property, to get off of the property because she was taking photographs and trespassing our property while someone was working at our church doing some cleanup one day and they needed a place to dump. Nobody wanted to charge God for a dump run. One individual. It's been a constant, and I really feel bad that there's been failure in our community for the last 7 years. While I've worked honestly and hard. Our lights are out at 8:30 at nighttime. We're in bed. We're up early in the morning, typically like a farmer, every day. There's calluses on my hands. I'm asking this commission today to grant this application and put us back to where we were the day that we wanted to buy that property. We've done nothing wrong. We're simply farmers. That's what I'm asking this commission today to do, is to look past those failures, grant those waivers today so that we can get back to business and I can provide a living for my family. It's been a nightmare. Thank you.
Hold on. Hold on. You need to talk about the number of trucks that come to the property.
During some of our really bad hurricanes that we had, I'm going to admit that some of the guys, because they were working so hard in our community, we had a demand that came up really hard. Some of the guys from the A&L tree and some of the guys were coming in 2 or 3 times a day. And I will admit, that during the massive parts of the hurricane while people were trying to get back on board, very odd, very rare, trying to get our town back secured. Each one of those guys might have come in on a course of maybe 20 loads for the day, maybe for that one day. And they were pushed up at nighttime and made a pile, and we made access for that, and then went right back to work the next day. That, I'm going to be honest with you, for probably 6 or 7 months, got our town back up on its feet. And when we were able to recertify the community by getting that, it was helpful to the community for everybody to have that opportunity. And you can listen to the guys tonight say that. On a normal basis, without non-storm, I think there might be, in the course of a maximum of 10 trucks on the course of a day. That's way out, that's way left field, 10 trucks a day. And that's high, and that's, I said it on maximum. They do come in our yard about 7 o'clock in the morning. They like to be on jobs at 8 o'clock in the morning working for their clients. Sometimes they do work late. We start our farm sometimes 6 o'clock in the morning, and they do come in quietly and dump, and they leave. They do have backup beepers. That's an OSHA regulation law for safety. There is noise on a farm. We let no farm be deemed a nuisance. Do we want the desire of having the animals on our property? We're designed to be able to have 4 or 5 baby cats, to be able to raise them at a time. And when we can actually, I'm going to say, we put one in our freezer to eat, and we can bring some to market. Middlesex Livestock Auction actually stops the auction for Heather while she sells her organic beef. They're raised in an organic level. And every farmer that purchased those products know that Heather's desire was to be in the agricultural business and to go out and get a big animal that, and they paid a premium for that. That I'm proud of. That I'm really proud of. The trucks coming out, I have one delivery truck. And there's a picture of that red mulch truck that says mulch wholesale and retail. I have one. The hydraulics on that truck, there's divisions in that truck that I can deliver 4 yards. It carries 20 yards. I can shake off 4 yards on that truck, or I can shake off 20 yards. So the trips that come out of that piece of property are 4 times combined, and I can do those great deliveries by having that truck less, by a great design that I built myself, so that I can make sure that the traffic was lower. I'm very respectful of the traffic in the neighborhood. Busy times of year, sometimes that extra cup of coffee does get you going, and I'll admit, I do like to run. But I'm asking the commission at this time if there's any other questions that you, is there anything else you would?
Yeah, talk about the mulch and
Okay.
the piles and the smoldering.
Okay, the natural composting product is, the coloring of it is actually what is actually considered composting. I can get that in manure. I can get it in a pile of leaves. You see a pile of grass in the back of a landscaper's truck. You can see the heat generating during that day. And it is exactly what Mrs. Lopez and the neighbor said, it's steam. It's not a raging fire, it's nothing like that here. And the process that we actually take by pushing the mulch up and going on top. Some of the vehicles that we do have are commercial. They do require, some of them do have farm plates and some are registered commercially for the commercial operation. Through the years, farming regulations have eased up on farmers, and everybody knew that farm plates, you'd only go, 15 miles to market or something like that here today, because farmers need to be very competitive in the markets. If I were to take any farm product, I don't care if it was a cucumber or a squash, and take it to the Hartford market, I'd be past my regular farm plates. So those commercial plates that take you past all of those things, those trucks have to be registered commercially, and they are commercially done by registration, they're done by fuel stickers, they're done by all of that. That's all very legal. The trailers that we do have, sometimes they're staying on site where we're working until a client actually wants them. We do have a trailer that's going to be delivered next week that has some hay to it. It's not on site, but when it comes back, it's empty. It goes into those empty storage bins that you kind of see. That's where they're backed in on the road. So we're constantly trying to find an income for the farm. That's why we've generated some firewood. We work every day out there. I need to pay my bills like everybody else does every day. And to be able to afford to do this wonderful operation with Heather and to go to school and fuel and all of that. We're no different than anybody else. So
The corn crib.
the corn crib. 18 Odd Road, Mike Milano was going to demolish a beautiful old corn crib. It was very historical in our town. We just had some people with Christine Goupil come up and say we wanted to preserve some of these older buildings, and Mike Milano was great enough to be able to assist me to get it up onto a trailer with his equipment. And our desire was to be able to take that and to use it as a chicken coop and to restore it back to its originality so we could preserve an older building that was going to be in the dumpster. It's wonderful, wonderfully built. It's great. It needs some repairs and some putty and paint, and it would really accent the old farm that we've been trying to build with the old barns and some of the old farm equipment and stuff like that. So it's not like it's brand new or some carefree building. We're trying to accent it so as you do go by the piece of property, it looks like it's more a vintage old farm than it is anything else. To purchase that corn crib would probably cost anywhere about $30,000. It's not illegal on the piece of property. It's sitting in a trailer, and it can be moved at any time, and it's in the approved parking space at this time. I was thinking that it was going to, we had looked at looking at another piece of property with Eric, and to move our operations out. It just didn't work out, and at that point, the building had stayed on the property, and our desire was to put it in the print to show where it was so we can make it legal through this application. As far as the rooster crowing, I don't have an answer for you at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Last question. Yep. Department of Agriculture report.
The Department of Agriculture, I thought we had submitted that with you. The Department of Agriculture came out and actually looked at our farm operation. If you notice that at that time, the flies were negligible, which means almost non-existent. Are there flies on the property? This week, the extreme humid heat has been almost disgusting, and I have to admit that it really is. It's really brutally hard to keep up with everything. The massive 5 or 6 inch pouring rains that we had in the last few weeks had us absolutely going crazy trying to figure out what to do with everything every day. It's not an easy task to be a farmer. It really, really isn't. There's weather conditions and heat conditions, and are there deaths for our chickens? I said to Torrance today, we check every day. Is there a possibility one old one will die, one gets sick? Yes, they do. But the basic general care of the animals is wonderful. It really is. They look healthy, they feel healthy. And I guess my last statement is, could you imagine owning an animal like Bob and Mary across the street and needing an attorney to be able to defend the right to have that horse? To go to the Zoning Board of Appeals was almost $10,000. by Tanya hired a big fancy attorney, and we thought we were all done. We thought we were working with the land use office to be able to provide those documentations. We didn't have $10,000 to do that. What do we have in legal fees? I'm going to ask Mr. Casella what his bill is in the last few weeks. Is there any questions I can answer for the commission?
Well, you didn't quite answer the question that was just asked, and that is, did you have the document from the state, the required report from the...
We did submit required reports in the packet of information that we provided. I think in my opinion, what the regulation requires is reporting to be done by the Department of Agriculture as they inspect the property for zoning compliance over the years, because things are going to change. There's not a static number of chickens or a static number of cows or a static number of any livestock. The question is, if required by the zoning enforcement officer or required by this commission, does what's on the property at a certain period of time meet the Department of Agriculture standards? And if necessary, we have to provide a report.
Do you have a recent report?
I don't believe we submitted one, but we can, if that's something that the commission...
That could take up to 60 or 90 days to be able to get the state to come out to do that. But I also wanted to say there was a day that I handed in a leaflet to the community about being a good neighbor. What is a good neighbor when you own a farm? You know, what are those things? One of the saddest parts I'm going to enter this is now is that there has been moments that I would like to be able to talk to Veronica as a neighbor, and there has been, some real volatile comments that have gone back and forth between us, and I'd like to publicly apologize for those. There's just been some really big tension that's been happening with this thing happening here, and I want to apologize for that. Maybe a low moment in my life. I think I'm bigger and better than that. But she also has to move a little bit and bend a little bit. She did move next to this farm. If you wanted the video, I'm more than willing to give it to you to show it 1990, what she moved into. So I don't know. The Department of Agriculture, when they come out and they look at the wealth and the health of the animals. And as long as there's clean water and good, clean, basic conditions, I believe our conditions are within 10% of saying that they're wonderful. And I've seen farms that are absolutely a lot worse, tremendously, and they pass inspection. We've done everything to be as wonderful as a good neighbor as we could, including helping neighbors bury some of their animals, and I never charge anything for that when we do that. We've always been a good neighbor to do whatever we could. As far as how many animals are allowed in that barn, the barn is, I believe, 32 by 28, and they require, for the state of Connecticut, if you'd like to know, or if you'd like to know, the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture has better specifications that for a large animal, they require a 6 by 8 stall size per animal. If we do the math, I believe if we really wanted to push the legalities of it, 14 or 15 large animals on our property, that's not our desire. We're asking you to meet those standards and to say, that's what we would like to do. It's not our desire to do that type of anything. So what we've had out there are a possibility of 4 or 5 larger animals and some goats and sheep and stuff like that there, which are considered small animals. I'd like to reflect also too that in the land records, if you look at them, that there were permits taken 2 months prior to the order of discontinued, that we have paid for those permits for those animals to be on that piece of property, thinking that we were going to be compliant with those. And I believe that Casella has a copy of that permit and the money that I paid the land use office. I don't know what happened to that. We had thought when we had paid that permit for those animals that this was all done. To be honest with you, we thought that's all Tom wanted. That permit was $15. The permit or the application for the zoning when it came into full effect was $15. $15 back in 1987. You paid $15 to Barbara Swan and you got a permit and it was acceptable and only approvable by your zoning enforcement officer, not a commission. She took it one step further and brought it to you people for certification just to make sure it was all done and over. She did the right thing by making sure that we were certified. We never thought we'd be into this tonight. We never would. Okay?
I have a few other questions.
Sure.
I'm sure there's other commissioners.
Yeah, I have let me follow up on the report question that was outstanding, if it's okay. One suggestion, obviously, if the commission would like us to get a report, we can do that. Otherwise, it could be a condition of approval that there's no zoning compliance following the granting of the special exception unless a report is provided to the zoning enforcement officer with the number of animals that are on the site. And then that could be followed up on an annual basis, which I think is what's contemplated by your regulations. So,
Going back to 12.38.3C6, which says that the mulching portion of this can only cover 1,500 square feet.
15,000.
15,000 square feet.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the aerial pictures and also what you've been describing. You have not many places I've seen said what the coverage is of your current operation. Are you going to have to change the coverage that you have to reduce it to fit this? Because it appears to me that that's a lot more than 15,000.
I don't have a scale on me, so I can't measure this out. There's a note on here, mulch composite area 14,000 square feet on the site plan.
That's the deposit area, but it also should include, according to that,
The storage.
the storage area, wait a second, I lost the thing. It should include the storage, it should include the grinding material, or the processing material. So it's not just the compost, or, composted material.
Yeah, I think it's this area, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the area that's here, in the central portion of the rear of the property. And Jeff, am I correct that the storage of the mulch ultimately will come down here at some point?
Goes up to that bin, and then we use the bins down below for the product that is down below.
So it's this plus that?
Yes.
Because
And that's the bins plus the area with the
Right,
horse.
clearing the square footage of the bins, which now is the ready-made product, and the area that we manufacture up on top of the hill, that's all within those realms of 15,000 square feet.
Now, that sound, is that consistent with where you are now, or is it a smaller area than where you are now?
My understanding is it's consistent with where we are now.
It is at its, if we were to start production tomorrow, we would be using the 15,000 square feet, which has already been laid out for that.
My concern is also with 1238.3C5, the vegetation buffer.
Yeah.
Based on your drawing there, I don't see a vegetative buffer that's shown. That, I will admit, that concerns me with the landscape plan.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see that in there, I don't see, I really, when I look at it, I don't clearly see where the limits are for the production and the storage of the mulch, and I want that to be very clear on whatever drawing would be provided.
Mike, if you look under the best management practices for mulch that we provided to you people, they talk about the mulched embankments and how that
Well, I know, but
enhances
it's gotta
that
be
to
on,
have the
it's gotta be
vegetative
on the
growth.
plan.
You can see now in the photographs, you can see the vegetation. If we were to give you vegetation growth around the whole thing, we would be taking 4 or 5 inch diameter trees down and planting smaller trees in there. That just doesn't make any sense because it's actually pretty provided. Mrs. Lopez has stated that, this vegetative buffer up along the top of the property, that actually is now providing with the mulch area. It's almost 12 feet tall. That mulch area is already 12 feet tall. So the vegetative buffer I thought was designed so that when we actually had a flat laying plan, that vegetation buffer would be able to see it. But with the vegetation buffer, I believe Torrance was out there today, gives even greater opportunity for coverage that you can't even see it. So if we were to buy 4 feet trees or whatever that was at that point and plant them, the better part of this is the berm that's already 15 feet tall. You can barely see the whole operation from the road.
I'm not talking about putting in new trees, I'm talking about showing it on your drawing, showing what you have on your drawing.
I believe there's photographs on the edge of today, and Torrance, which is actually out there already, is growing very, very well.
let's hear what all the
Okay, with that, I let other members speak.
I want to comment on what you said. I agree with what you said. The site plan is inadequate. And I don't want to waive that. I think we need that to make an informed decision. It needs to show these things with accurate descriptions of setbacks, where things are. The comments that, oh, it's existing, we don't need to do a plan, that doesn't, I don't believe that that is acceptable. I think the plan is to show both existing or proposed, to show the commission and put into the record that these things are in compliance with the use group that you want. And I struggle with how we can make that decision without having an accurate plan to show that we've met all the setbacks, the vegetative buffers. My sense is that we also would require what the maximum height of the mulch pile is going to be. That's been on other plans that have come through to us. Again, I'm not opposed to the application, but I don't feel that we've been given enough information to make an informed decision, and I think that some of the waivers that have been requested will prohibit us from getting that information. So site plan, I think, is a big one. The E&S controls, we have not approved a single operation like this in this commission without an erosion and sediment control plan. That, to me, is one of the most basic things. You're up on a hill, it's River Road, there's a river at the bottom, runoff is going to go down. We just need to know how that's going to be controlled. And I'm sure that you have methods in place, but again, it should be in a plan so that in the future, if there's ever a question, we can go back to the plan and say, here's what was approved, he's meeting it or he's not meeting it.
outline for the commission.
Some of the vehicles that we do have are commercial. They do require, some of them do have farm plates and some are registered commercially for the commercial operation. Through the years, farming regulations have eased up on farmers, and everybody knew that farm plates, you'd only go 15 miles to market or something like that here today, because farmers need to be very competitive in the markets. If I were to take any farm product, I don't care if it was a cucumber or a squash, and take it to the Hartford market, I'd be past my regular farm plates. So those commercial plates that take you past all of those things, those trucks have to be registered commercially, and they are commercially done by registration, they're done by fuel stickers, they're done by all of that. That's all very legal. The trailers that we do have, sometimes they're staying on site where we're working until a client actually wants them. We do have a trailer that's going to be delivered next week that has some hay to it. It's not on site, but when it comes back, it's empty. It goes into those empty storage bins that you kind of see. That's where they're backed in on the road. So we're constantly trying to find an income for the farm. That's why we've generated some firewood. We work every day out there. I need to pay my bills like everybody else does every day. And to be able to afford to do this wonderful operation with Heather and to go to school and fuel and all of that. We're no different than anybody else. So
The corn crib.
the corn crib. 18 Odd Road, Mike Milano was going to demolish a beautiful old corn crib. It was very historical in our town. We just had some people with Christine Goupil come up and say we wanted to preserve some of these older buildings, and Mike Milano was great enough to be able to assist me to get it up onto a trailer with his equipment. And our desire was to be able to take that and to use it as a chicken coop and to restore it back to its originality so we could preserve an older building that was going to be in the dumpster. It's wonderful, wonderfully built. It's great. It needs some repairs and some putty and paint, and it would really accent the old farm that we've been trying to build with the old barns and some of the old farm equipment and stuff like that. So it's not like it's brand new or some carefree building. We're trying to accent it so as you do go by the piece of property, it looks like it's more a vintage old farm than it is anything else. To purchase that corn crib would probably cost anywhere about $30,000. It's not illegal on the piece of property. It's sitting on a trailer, and it can be moved at any time, and it's in the approved parking space at this time. I was thinking that it was going to, we had looking at another piece of property with Eric, and to move our operations out. It just didn't work out, and at that point, the building had stayed on the property, and our desire was to put it in the print to show where it was so we could make it legal through this application. As far as the rooster crowing, I don't have an answer for you at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Last question.
Yeah.
Department of Agriculture report.
The Department of Agriculture, I thought we had submitted that with you. The Department of Agriculture came out and actually looked at our farm operation. If you notice that at that time, the flies were negligible, which means almost non-existent. Are there flies on the property? This week, the extreme humid heat has been almost disgusting, and I have to admit that it really is. It's really brutally hard to keep up with everything. The massive 5 or 6 inch pouring rains that we had in the last few weeks had us absolutely going crazy trying to figure out what to do with everything every day. It's not an easy task to be a farmer. It really, really isn't. There's weather conditions and heat conditions, and are there deaths for our chickens? I said to Torrance today, we check every day. Is there a possibility one old one will die, one gets sick? Yes, they do. But the basic general care of the animals is wonderful. It really is. They look healthy, they feel healthy. And I guess my last statement is, could you imagine owning an animal like Bob and Mary across the street and needing an attorney to be able to defend the right to have that horse? To go to the zoning board of appeals, it was almost $10,000 by the time you hired a big fancy attorney. And we thought we were all done. We thought we were working with the land use office to be able to provide those documentations. We didn't have $10,000 to do that. What do we have in legal fees? I'm going to ask Mr. Casella what his bill is in the last few weeks. Is there any questions I can answer for the commission?
Well, you didn't quite answer the question that was just asked, and that is, did you have the document from the state, the required report from the...
We did submit required reports in the packet of information that we provided. I think in my opinion, what the regulation requires is reporting to be done by the Department of Agriculture as they inspect the property for zoning compliance over the years, because things are going to change. There's not a static number of chickens or a static number of cows or a static number of any livestock. The question is, if required by the zoning enforcement officer or required by this commission, does what's on the property at a certain period of time meet the Department of Agriculture standards? And if necessary, we have to provide a report.
Do you have a recent report?
I don't believe we submitted one, but we can, if that's something that the commission...
That could take up to 60 or 90 days to be able to get the state to come out to do that. But I also wanted to state there was a day that I handed in a leaflet to the community about being a good neighbor. What is a good neighbor when you own a farm? You know, what are those things? One of the saddest parts I'm going to enter this now is that there has been moments that I would like to be able to talk to Veronica as a neighbor, and there has been, some real volatile comments that have gone back and forth between us, and I'd like to publicly apologize for those. There's just been some really big tension that's been happening with this thing happening here, and I want to apologize for that. Maybe low moment in my life. I think I'm bigger and better than that. But she also has to move a little bit and bend a little bit. She did move next to this farm. If you wanted the video, I'm more than willing to give it to you to show it 1990, what she moved into. So I don't know. The Department of Agriculture, when they come out and they look at the wealth and the health of the animals. And as long as there's clean water and good, clean, basic conditions, I believe our conditions are within 10% of saying that they're wonderful. And I've seen farms that are absolutely a lot worse, tremendously, and they pass inspection. We've done everything to be as wonderful as a good neighbor as we could, including helping neighbors bury some of their animals, and I never charge anything for that when we do that. We've always been a good neighbor to do whatever we could. As far as how many animals are allowed in that barn, the barn is, I believe, 32 by 28. And they require, for the state of Connecticut, if you'd like to know, or if you'd like to know, the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture has better specifications that for a large animal, they require a 6 by 8 stall size per animal. If we do the math, I believe, if we really wanted to push the legalities of it, 14 or 15 large animals on our property, that's not our desire. You're asking me to meet those standards and to say, that's what we would like to do, it's not our desire. to do that type of anything. So what we've had out there are a possibility of 4 or 5 larger animals and some goats and sheep and stuff like that there, which are considered small animals. I'd like to reflect also too that in the land records, if you look at them, that there were permits taken 2 months prior to the order of discontinued, that we have paid for those permits for those animals to be on that piece of property, thinking that we were going to be compliant with those. And I believe that Sal has a copy of that permit and the money that I paid the land use office. I don't know what happened to that. We had thought when we had paid that permit for those animals, that this was all done. To be honest with you, we thought that's all town wanted. That permit was $15. The permit or the application for the zoning, when it came into full effect, was $15. $15 back in 1987. You paid $15 to Barbara Swan and you got a permit and it was acceptable and only approvable by your zoning enforcement officer, not a commission. She took it one step further and brought it to you people for certification just to make sure it was all done and over. She did the right thing by making sure that we were certified. We never thought we'd be into this tonight. We never would. Okay?
I have a few other questions.
Sure.
I'm sure there are some other commissioners.
Yeah, I have let me follow up on the report question that was outstanding, if it's okay. One suggestion, obviously, if the commission would like us to get a report, we can do that. Otherwise, it could be a condition of approval that there's no zoning compliance following the granting of the special exception unless a report is provided to the zoning enforcement officer with the number of animals that are on the site. And then that could be followed up on an annual basis, which I think is what's contemplated by your regulations. So.
Going back to 12.38.3C6, which says that the mulching portion of this can only cover 1,500 square feet.
15,000.
15,000 square feet, excuse me. I'm looking at the aerial pictures and also what you've been describing. You have not many places I've seen said what the coverage is of your current operation. Are you going to have to change the coverage that you have to reduce it to fit this? Because it appears to me that that's a lot more than 15,000.
I don't have a scale on me, so I can't measure this out. There's a note on here, mulch composite area 14,000 square feet on the site plan.
That's the deposit area, but it also should include, according to that, the storage area, wait a second, I lost the thing. It should include the storage, it should include the grinding material or the processing material. So it's not just the compost that's, or, you know, composted material.
Yeah, I think it's this area, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the area that's here, in the central portion of the rear of the property. And Jeff, am I correct that the storage of the mulch ultimately will come down here at some point?
It goes up to that bin, and then we use the bins down below for the product that is down below.
So it's this plus that?
Yes.
And that's the bins plus the area with the
Right, figuring the square footage of the bins, which now is the ready-made product, and the area that we manufacture up on top of the hill, that's all within those realms of 15,000 square feet.
Now, that sound, you know, is that consistent with where you are now, or is it a smaller area than where you are now?
My understanding is it's consistent with where we are now.
It is at its, if we were to start production tomorrow, we would be using the 15,000 square feet, which has already been laid out for that.
My concern is also with 1238.3C5, the vegetation buffer.
Yeah.
Based on your drawing there, I don't see a vegetative buffer that's shown. That I will admit that concerns me with the landscape plan.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see that in there. I don't see, I really, when I look at it, I don't clearly see where the limits are for the production and the storage of the mulch, and I want that to be very clear. on whatever drawing would be provided.
Mike, if you look under the best management practices for mulch that we provided to you people, they talk about the mulched embankments and how that
Well, I know, but
enhances
it's gotta
that
be
to
on,
have the
it's gotta be
vegetative
on the
growth.
plan.
You can see now in the photographs, you can see the vegetation. If we were to give you vegetation growth around the whole thing, we would be taking 4 or 5 inch diameter trees down and planting smaller trees in there. That just doesn't make any sense because it's actually pretty provided. Mrs. Lopez has stated that, this vegetative buffer up along the top of the property, that actually is now providing with the mulch area, it's almost 12 feet tall. That mulch area is already 12 feet tall. So the vegetative buffer I thought was designed so that when we actually had a flat laying plan, that vegetation buffer would be able to see it. But with the vegetation buffer, I believe Torrance was out there today, gives even greater opportunity for coverage that you can't even see it. So if we were to buy 4 feet trees or whatever that was at that point and plant them, the better part of this is the berm that's already 15 feet tall. You can barely see the whole operation from the road.
I'm not talking about putting in new trees, I'm talking about showing it on your drawing, showing what you have on your drawing.
I believe there's photographs on the edge of today and Torrance will tell you it's actually out there ready. It's growing very, very well.
Let's hear what all the...
Okay, with that, I can let other members speak.
I want to comment on what you said. I agree with what you said. The site plan is inadequate. And I don't want to waive that. I think we need that to make an informed decision. It needs to show these things with accurate descriptions of setbacks, where things are. The comments that, oh, it's existing, we don't need to do a plan, that doesn't, I don't believe that is acceptable. I think the plan is to show both existing or proposed, to show the commission and put into the record that these things are in compliance with the use group that you want. And I struggle with how we can make that decision without having an accurate plan to show that we've met all the setbacks, the vegetative buffers. My sense is that we also would require what the maximum height of the mulch pile is going to be. That's been on other plans that have come through to us. So again, I'm not opposed to the application, but I don't feel that we've been given enough information to make an informed decision, and I think that some of the waivers that have been requested will prohibit us from getting that information. So site plan, I think, is a big one. The E&S controls, we have not approved a single operation like this in this commission without an erosion and sediment control plan. That, to me, is one of the most basic things. You're up on a hill, it's River Road, there's a river at the bottom, runoff is going to go down. We just need to know how that's going to be controlled. And I'm sure that you have methods in place, but again, it should be in a plan so that in the future, if there's ever a question, we can go back to the plan and say, here's what was approved, he's meeting it or he's not meeting it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. My question actually is a bit of a step back from some of this, which is trying to understand precisely where we are in terms of the legalities of what's going on here, and I believe this is directed mostly at our own attorney. This is a is a special exception application for a property. Is there any legal difference between this particular application to operate a farming operation on this 3.5 acre parcel in a residential neighborhood in an R80 zone versus what we would be looking at if any other owner of a property in any other R80 zone came in and wanted to run a farming operation? Is the legal status of this application precisely the same as that, irrespective of what was going on with this property 25, 30 years ago?
Yes. You have to be satisfied that the requirements of the special exception are met. In terms of requests for waivers, there might be a situation where it's a bit different, where somebody comes in where land is completely undeveloped and says, I want to build a farm here, I want to create pasture land here, I want to build a barn here. So in this particular case, much of what is being requested to be authorized by a special exception exists in the field. But in terms of compliance with all of the various standards, you either have to satisfy yourself that, some additional information is not necessary under this request for the waivers, or it all needs to be provided. And the criteria for considerations for a special exception are what's being put before you. They are applying for a special exception. So yes, that is the criteria you can apply.
Okay. My question wasn't specifically directed at the waivers, but at the nature of the application. Right. So following on from that, the fact that this is legally a new special exception application in an R80 zone, how does that interact with right to farm statutes? Because it seems as if by filing for a special exception, the applicant is acknowledging that it hasn't been a farm up until now. I mean, how does that interact with the right to farm and things like we can't consider whether or not the flies and the odors are a nuisance? And also, I'm not intimately familiar with case law on right to farm in the state of Connecticut. Does the fact that something is considered a farm mean that it can be a farm for any agricultural use? That is, if you are a Christmas tree farm, can you then become a pig farm? Could we wake up tomorrow morning and Shamard Vineyards could decide to pull out all the grapevines and have swine instead? How does right to farm interact with a change in if there's a substantial change in the nature of the agricultural operation? And finally, is there any case law in the state of Connecticut about whether mulching operations that use material brought to the site, as opposed to just mulching your own brush, are considered to be agricultural or considered to be industrial? I know that there's an enormous case in Howard County, Maryland right now on exactly this issue, and it's working through the courts and everything there. Do we have anything comparable in the state of Connecticut, and what has been what's going on? So that's several different questions.
Sure is. And I'll go all the way back to the beginning and say that I wasn't raising the question of the waiver because you were specifically asking about it. I just throw that in the sense that you said, is this just like somebody else applies for a special exception? And my answer to that was yes. The only difference would be it's a little different when there's a lot of the improvements are already there versus an applicant who wants to come in and build something new. Now, in terms of the right to farm question, there can be a lot of confusion that frankly, the agricultural community sometimes raises in relationship with zoning to say essentially that the right to farm statute creates some kind of entitlement under zoning. And it really doesn't. What it does is it protects against the persons who come to the nuisance, somebody who moves to where someone is operating a farm and claims that the use itself is a nuisance under private property law. Because that's under, when I went to law school, you have a farm and it's there and everybody knows it's there. A person could buy right next to it and then file suit in court and say that's a nuisance, you gotta shut the farm down because it smells too much, right? The right to farm law was really directed at that issue. So in your situation, you have special exception discretion here. And so you do get to evaluate, your regulations acknowledge that you think that farms can go in residential neighborhoods, on residential properties. You determine that in your regs. But you have to satisfy yourselves that the various safeguards are in place, the things like the buffering, the things like, that it's appropriate in your statement of use. The question of can you approve a Christmas tree farm and suddenly becomes a swine farm, that is governed by your statement of use when somebody comes in and asks for a special exception. And they could specifically say, I am going to have beef cattle, or I am only going to have chickens, or you can ask them to specify that. And if your special exception ties to a specific statement of use, They can't go beyond that, because that's what you do as part of the special exception, you evaluate that. Same thing with hours of operation. In this case, you have hours of operation built into your regulations. But that's the kind of thing that when you get other kinds of special exceptions, you know you can put reasonable conditions on a special exception in order to protect, the character of the neighborhood and the like. So in terms of case law, as to the processing of mulch, it really is 169 towns, I think all 169 now have zoning, but it might be one less than that. Everyone adopts their own sets of regulations, and I have seen some that make it very clear that processing is only the material that's made from the property itself. I don't really see that in your regulations, but your commission has to interpret your regulations. There really isn't any case law, I think, that would shed any light on your regulations, because they are somewhat unique. You adopt them, and you specifically say, for example, if you look at the definition of farming, the processing of mulch is not something that would come under the definition in the state statutes per se, but a town can include them and make it clear that that's something that's allowed as part of the farming operation, and you've done that in yours. So whether or not you can bring material in to process is something that I think you can decide, but I certainly don't see any language that prohibits it, or says that can't happen, or says that the only production of mulch is from the property itself. It would seem to me that you'd have to have an enormous piece of property in order to be able to generate all of the wood in order to be able to create mulch. But again, it's your regulations, you folks have to interpret them. But I certainly don't see anything that comes out of there that says that you can't bring material on to process as part of an agricultural operation on your regulations. If I could I jump in on just a couple of points? If you have more questions, please, let's go.
Just to clarify what you said so far, from a legal point of view and a zoning reg point of view, what Mr. Cashman is applying for is a new farm. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's how you could take into consideration what's been there and how long it's been there, things like that, and trying to evaluate should it qualify for a special exception. But analytically, you're determining that it's an appropriate use on the site through a new special permit application, not something that's created that's not conforming. If I could comment on just a couple of points that think came up. One, I want to sort of reverse something that I said in my memo, in part because I noticed when I looked at Attorney Shields' letter that there is a section under the farming regulation that does specifically tie to 28. I had said earlier that I thought Chapter 28 should only apply if the livestock was an accessory use. What I did notice is that it seems somewhat contradictory, but you do seem to incorporate under the requirements of a farm that livestock has to comply with the requirements of 28. So that would then put you into the situation where you should tackle the question of whether the intent of having livestock in an enclosure means a fence. All right. Now, one thing I will very vigorously disagree with counsel for the opponent to the application. The court did not. There is no court ruling on what that section means. What happened is the zoning enforcement officer made a ruling that a fence is an enclosure for the purposes of that regulation, and that wasn't appealed. And because it wasn't appealed, all the Superior Court said was, since you didn't appeal it, you can't challenge that ruling now. What we have now is the Planning and Zoning Commission being faced with an application to apply its regulations. You are not bound in any way by anything the former zoning enforcement officer determined. That doesn't mean you won't agree with them and say that an enclosure under that section 28, subsection H, that an enclosure means a fence, and that fences have to be outside of the setbacks. That's something that you're going to have to interpret. And as I suggested earlier, if you do apply that section of the regulations, I personally, but you're the folks that get to read your regulations, I personally think that an enclosure is intended to go along with building and stable for something in which the animals can be housed and can be kept indoors, and not a fence that can go around the perimeter of your property. But that's something, and specifically it's 28.14H is where that language is. So I think that you should tackle that question as part of your consideration of the application and decide whether enclosure means a fence or whether it means some kind of a structure that's not a building that's intended to house livestock. The last thing on this, that from the discussions that have been presented regarding the regulations, is the request for the report from the Department of Agriculture. The way I read your regulations is that that's something that's get provided within 30 days of the commencement of operations. So going to the question before, do you treat this as a new farm? If you look at the application requirements don't say that you have to get a report from the Department of Agriculture. It says that has to happen within 30 days after you start the operations, and then that report is going to define the density of the number of livestock or whatever that would be there. So I encourage you to take a look at that, because when it asks for the report, it says as otherwise, as provided in this section, and then you continue down, and the first part where it asks for a report is within 30 days after the commencement. So that certainly wouldn't be something they'd be able to handle when they do the application. And I think that's also consistent, talking to Mr. Downs, with your application checklist. You don't have an item on the checklist that you have to have a Department of Agriculture report before a farm is permitted. And I think that's consistent, at least with the way I read, and encourage you to do it also, as to whether there's a specific requirement that needs to be provided as part of an application, as opposed to being provided within 30 days of commencement and annually thereafter. Because I think that's what your regulations say. Anything else I could comment on in terms of some of the legal presentations you made tonight?
Very good question. Yeah.
I brought this up when we first accepted the application, and this is probably why the attorney thought I was against it, is I cautioned why there were so many requests to waive. Especially since in my 2.5 years, some of those items never get waived, such as soil erosion control plan. If you had an application like this, why wouldn't you just do the requirements? And I heard the testimony from the attorney that, well, it's already that way. But this is an after the fact application. It's already that way because it's currently in violation. So that's kind of the big issue, and that's kind of what everybody's talking about here. Yes, it's been a farm for so many years in violation. Yes, it's been a wood chip pile for so many years in violation. So yeah, the topography is not changing because it changed years ago. So why would we waive, by the way, we wouldn't waive almost any of this for anybody. Why wouldn't we waive any of these? And that doesn't mean I'm for or against the farm. It means all our other applicants had to go through this. The buffer. The buffer doesn't count if it's on her property. It only counts if it's on your property. So I'm looking at the site plan trying to figure out how you could maintain 15,000 square feet and have the vegetative buffer in place. But I don't really know that because the site plan is incomplete. I don't have the materials I need to have in front of me. I have a question for our attorney. 27-1-60 says production and manufacturing of goods and materials is not permitted in the RA. So how does that impact it?
Well, it is permitted as a special exception under the farm section.
All right, so I guess the hinge-pin for me is there's two pieces of this. You want to have a farm with animals, I get it, and you want to have a manufacturing facility, a processing facility. I guess the question from our attorney is, how do we treat decisions that we've made in the past, very recently, for the same type of operation? How do we weigh that into our deliberation?
There's a legal standard that if there's an start off by look at the standards of the regulations and whether the applicant has met the requirements, the way that they're written. If there is an ambiguous provision of the regulations, there's law that says that if your commission has adopted a time-tested interpretation of a phrase or a word or et cetera, then you can rely on that. So I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but if there's been an instance in which your commission has interpreted some of these things in a way that's different than what the application is proposing here, you might be able to rely on that. But can you expand in terms of something that you've
Sure,
done
we recently denied tree companies dumping wood chips on a concrete pad only for transferring those wood chips in an industrial zone. It's just currently denied within the last year.
Because they're not a farm. They had no farm, agricultural, any input. It was a junkyard with highly flammable products in a junkyard that they were using torches to cut stuff, and it was deemed a fire hazard. This was designed by Ed Casella as a workout program to be able to allow us to have the mulch on our property. And at this point, what we have determined was all of this, and I'm going to say it right now, that we were legal 100% non-conforming to the zoning regulations. It was the commission's desire to make sure that the non-conforming, we were deemed non-conforming. And legal with that, because now your zoning regulations came into effect. You're taking 30 years worth of non-conforming and expecting us to be able to perform miracles for 30 years worth of agricultural something here, and we're asking for those fairnesses to be done so we can make it to the target line so we can get back to business. Okay, that's it.
I have one more question.
Yeah, I have
The applicant stated that he takes animals from other people and buries them on his property.
He never said that.
He
never said he buries them on his
He
property.
said he buries them on his property.
Yeah, he never said he buried them on our property.
Buried them?
Guys, wait, we should,
Sorry.
Buried for neighbors on their property.
And that's why I'm clarifying for the public record.
And if I could just jump in, because I think the applicant popped in when Mr. Muscat was asking me actually the question on treating the two things. And now that I understand what you were talking about in the industrial zone, is where I started, which is you should apply the applicable regulations to this particular application. And in this application, your standards for special exception in this zone allow, as part of a farming operation, production, processing, preparation, or storage of horticultural commodities, including compost, mulch, manure, or other biomass products. So you have to interpret and apply that language. I wouldn't think that an application involving how mulch was treated on a pad in an industrial zone really implicated that language. So I think you kind of got it fresh in having to apply that language that I just read to you to this application.
I wanted to respond as a commission member to Mr. Shields' question about how you can make an informed decision. And as a commission member, I need to go on the record as to why I feel I can make an informed decision. I don't feel we're relitigating anything. We're not a court. We're not charged with that responsibility. We are a citizen board. And as such, I put a lot of my faith, if not all of it, in the process that we agreed to support when we took our oath and when we agreed to the Code of Ethics. We have a subcommittee of our commission that decided they would take on this issue for us. We had 2 members from either party to represent us. We had attorneys representing the town as well as the applicant. And we had our interim zoning CEO, and I trust them, and I've read all their work, and if I were to now say, well, I know more, I don't. And I'm a citizen, and so I'm going to trust the process and all those people who came to this agreement. I think there are a lot of issues that have been thrown out that really are not related. I'm sorry there's a smell, I'm sorry there's flies. I lived in Vermont for 38 years, I got used to it. It's not something the law responds to. There's never been a fire. People confuse smoke with steam all the time. We can go on and on about this, but basically, this has been a stain on our town. all parties are responsible. It's not one person's fault when you end up in court. I've been in court myself. You can't say you're only a victim. Everybody has a part in it. And it's been a stain on our town that we have spent over $30,000 of taxpayer money to fart around with some operation that is basically a family trying to make a living. Apparently, it's working because people go buy mulch from them all the time, so it's not like the community doesn't want this business. And I don't feel that at this point...
You dispose of yourself before the hearing's over, Mr. Chairman.
Sure is.
You've got to be really careful about
You're not allowed to predispose yourself before
I'm
the
saying
hearing's
why
over.
I'm answering his question about how I can make an informed decision. I haven't made my decision, but I'm just saying this is the background that I've come to this table as a citizen. I'm still obviously listening, but I don't like being questioned as to how I can make a decision. That's how I can make a decision. I believe in the process.
And I agree with the same thing as far as making an informed decision, but I think on my part is making sure that we have all the information to make an informed decision. So that some of the things that we're looking for waivers or not getting that information, but where we've done it in the past, that we're setting ourselves up for something that, down the road may cause more problems. I know they want the farm, we know it's there, it's been there forever, they want to work it the way they want to work it, but, a site plan that shows the proper setbacks, making sure that those things are done now, instead of, approving an application and then saying, well, let's work at it down the road. And then we get ourselves into problems again like we did in the past, and we were, handshake here, handshake there, let's get it done. It seems like we're moving things forward in the right direction, but if we're putting it on paper to say, this is what we need done, prior to us making a decision on an application, and then saying, subject to this or subject to that, I agree, it's a farm, yes, and the people that live out there, there's going to be issues, unfortunately. But they all live together, they're all neighbors, they all have to work together, they all should work together. Everybody in the town should work together. Everybody's happy, with some of the things that Jeff provides for this town, and I get it, everybody likes Jeff, I understand all that. But there's also things that we have to do as a commission to make sure that we're protecting the town for the decisions that we make when it comes to something like that. And to sit there and, the waivers are tough, I mean, they are. We haven't really granted a lot of those waivers to other applications that come before us. And it's just making sure that we're doing it the right way.
How can there be a fair decision when there's...
State your name, sure.
You're out of order.
Well, I can't say nothing.
Chairman. Yes, Mike.
I just want to state that you asked us to form a subcommittee, we did. I was on it, Alan on it. Alan came in.
I don't have to.
Excuse me?
I was not on this meeting. I went to one meeting.
You came to one meeting, that's what I
I
said.
listened.
Go ahead, Mike.
Anyway, we had 2 meetings on it, and we took it very serious that you asked us to do. And we had legal counsel from the town, the applicant, and the applicant there. And we went through it once, we went through it twice, and we all agreed that it was reasonable to, despite what some people think, it was reasonable to waive these requirements, okay, to move on. So, that's what we did, and
That's your recommendation.
that's our recommendation, that's clearly our recommendation to this committee in this town, and our zoning enforcement officer was with it, he documented, so we did our job.
Okay. Are there any more questions for the applicant at this time? Okay. Going to the statement that Ken made at the beginning, we should probably think about what we want to do with the waivers now before we would close the public hearing.
Can I ask Lawrence one quick question?
Yes, you may.
Based on what you've heard tonight, is it still your recommendation to waive things like the site plan?
Yes. And I wanted to offer, if there are any questions, I don't know
Even though it doesn't show
which members
setbacks.
have been to the site, but I did go to the site today and spent 50 minutes. And as I said in the little note there was nothing I saw that contradicted information that was presented in the waivers. I can attest to vegetated buffers, what they actually look like, you know, the height of the berms. You know, I walked the site. If anybody has any questions, I can offer testimony regarding what I saw at the site.
What do we do 20 years from now when you're not here? That isn't accurate, and somebody is disputing the farm. I can't believe you are saying that a mulch pile on top of a mountain doesn't require a simple soil erosion control plan, because know what that means. It doesn't mean that that piece of paper doesn't exist. It means he doesn't have to have a plan. So remember that mall? Remember that was going on and all that soil was going on? But if he didn't have that, if they didn't have it in the plan, what are you going to do to it other than civilly? And I'm shocked that an acting CEO would recommend not to have a simple soil erosion control plan, something you can Google in 10 minutes.
So soil erosion.
Well, I can, if I may address that. I did raise those questions, but we came to a consensus that it wasn't needed based on the information that was presented. And when I went out to the site today, I went out in one respect to look at the site, to estimate where site drainage would go and to see what the lay of the land looked like. And my opinion was that based on the evidence of the site, including some of the evidence of recent stormwater flows, showed that the flow comes down the road exactly as was presented in the application. So I felt that what was presented in descriptions was adequate, and therefore I concurred with our co-subcommittee members that the plan wasn't necessary because the information that was presented was consistent with the language that was presented. I'm not shocked at all.
I considered in the past, the soil erosion control plan can be exactly what you just said. So we just granted one, and the soil erosion control plan was that we don't need a soil erosion control plan because everything flows back into the property. That's the plan, but it's written down.
We had it.
It's in the statement of use.
Well, you want us to waive the soil erosion control plan?
That's what the subcommittee is
Is
recommending.
wood chips considered soil?
No.
Under section 32-3-8, soil, any unconsolidated mineral or organic material of any origin. That's our
I
definition.
don't understand the question. The committee recommended that to waive the soil
I'll
erosion
stand down.
control.
We don't need soil erosion control.
Well, that's our recommendation. It's up to the commission to decide whether to accept that recommendation.
One of the, just.
How do we protect our neighbors?
Pardon?
How do we protect the neighbors?
Well, you can't really stand down with
All
that.
right, sit.
I think they are, is my opinion. You don't have to take that opinion, but.
Okay. So, what we want to do is,
Can I make one comment on something? I just want to respond to Mr. Moore. There is a site plan, and the setbacks are shown on the site plan. And I can show them to you.
Well, what I questioned was the accuracy of that. I could draw that myself from here without ever going to the site. That, to me, that's not I work in this industry, that's not an accurate
Okay.
site. There's things on there that are not
But this, what, you know, I don't mean to get into a back and forth, but remember, what the waivers were requesting, the two primary ones are contours and trees over 18 inches. Those are the two kind of initial ones, and then the architectural plan, lighting plan, traffic study, S&E plan. Maybe we've provided an S&E plan that you think is adequate. You know, Jeff could provide arrows here that shows where the grade to drain is. Again, we're being conservative with what we were requesting because we weren't sure what the information
I think
requirements.
Orange could provide that water flow. He was out there today, saw it without having.
So, yeah, I just wanted
That I provided
No,
that because you have some of the
I
independent.
just wanted to be clear, I wanted to understand what your concerns were.
You can change the language then to what Harry suggested. No, because of the existing conditions, no soil erosion plan is required.
What if
That's
the,
not a waiver.
correct, what if the conditions were to change?
Well, they always do change, they do change. Storm flow changes,
That's why we have soil erosion control plans.
but we're here to existing climatic conditions. We're here for that.
Mr. Chairman.
Rightfully or wrongfully.
Chairman, I think subcommittee review all of this, we discussed that in length. And zoning erosion control plans are very typically used in new construction, not this. And our zoning enforcement office went out there, confirmed that we're okay. And we've studied it for 2 meetings, total of probably 6 hours. So that needs to be stated too.
Mike? Well, I will say, again, Mike, and I probably beating a dead horse with this, but my biggest concern is that I'm not seeing the vegetative buffer shown. And I really would like to see I really want that on the plan. To me, that, I'm not worried about every tree, I'm worried about what the boundaries of the vegetative buffer are and how far they are from the property line. So that you really see that.
There is a note there that mentions brush/wooded area to remain. It's my opinion that that describes the area on that side that was lined by mature trees. Actually, when I looked at it, I said, oh, there is a buffer there. It's the entire, well, with the grass that's in front of the trees, it's over 25 feet.
Grass is not a vegetative buffer.
The regulation doesn't say, in my opinion, that 25 feet of it has to be trees. There is a whole
quadrant, is that what you're talking
Pardon?
about? The northeast quadrant of the property?
The northwest corner of this property
I'm
is
looking
this.
at the other side, the other.
This area, there are trees, large trees all through this area. You're correct that they're not on
That's
the
what I was
Cashman
worried
property.
about, yeah.
That's significant, right?
Pardon me?
Wouldn't that be significant to the site plan since it's supposed to be?
If it's required to be on the property, yes.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Because I didn't see the vegetation on that side.
On that south side?
On that, right.
Well, if the commission chose, there could be a condition of approval to plant that.
Mr. Chairman, because of the late hour, can we just take each issue up one by one, make a vote, so the applicant knows how to move forward?
Yeah.
Make a vote on what, Mr. Chairman?
Well, we're talking about the various waivers. And so, okay,
Can we start with a recommendation from that subcommittee?
we can do that. We can start with just a vote on whether or not to accept the recommendation from the subcommittee as is.
So moved.
I didn't, you made the motion, is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay, so that would mean to give all the waivers and excusals. Okay? All those in favor of that?
Discussion?
Any discussion? We've been discussing.
I know. We're not only setting a precedent that any applicant can come in and get waivers for this, I think we're asking, some of the things we've raised are reasonable things to get, accurate site plan and erosion control. The process, again, this has nothing to do with the acceptance of the use. The process really bothers me. The whole thing is going down, even to the change in times of the public hearing. We have never done that before. And my fear is that this commission gets scrutinized so much, we just keep putting our necks on the chopping block.
Adam, I would entertain a friendly amendment if you've got something.
May I suggest,
I don't, your motion is to accept all waivers, correct?
The recommendations of the subcommittee.
So my amendment would be that we need an accurate site plan and erosion control plan.
I would agree with that.
Well, we have a motion that's on the table that's completely different than that, but.
Well,
So,
I'm
and
willing to entertain that.
you're willing to accept that, okay? If the-
What are we trying to accept?
That there be a more detailed site plan and an erosion control statement of some kind.
Oh, what do you mean by erosion control? As I said, erosion control.
Wood chips.
Yeah, we talked about earlier,
Sediment
a few sentences. Yeah.
Erosion control system is used for new construction.
No, it's not,
We all know.
Mike. That's
Yes, it is.
ridiculous. It's used for anything like this.
That's your opinion.
Whoa.
We have the commission, we have a subcommittee do this.
Okay,
Okay, we have a motion. so
we have a motion, I'd like to call the
Okay.
motion.
Can we clarify exactly what the motion is? Is it to accept the,
Recommendations of the subcommittee with
to the exception of the site plan and the,
Soil erosion.
soil erosion
addition?
plan, is that
Additions,
correct?
yes,
All right,
additions.
so we're voting, are we voting on the, you
The
accepted
whole
the
thing.
friendliness?
She accepted it.
Okay, so we're voting on the entire thing, which is to accept, okay, I just want to know what I'm
To
voting
accept
on.
what?
Your committee's
Yeah.
recommendation with the addition of having a site plan and an erosion control plan added.
I would like to offer a second amendment to the
I'll entertain
motion.
it.
And that is that we not require it for approval, but stipulate that it be provided within a year or. No.
I'm opposed to that, so,
Well,
What's the point of doing it?
You're going to be opposed to it, but you're going to.
Somebody please think about everybody. Think of the neighbors. If this was by your house.
Let's not get back into that, Gary.
Gary, it's your opinion.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask, is it just going to be clarification the applicant's going to need? One thing, just on the soil and erosion, because I just had to pull it up from the committee, because maybe it's to Commissioner Busquets' point, and maybe the submission is why it's not required, and maybe that would be satisfactory if you decide to require a soil and erosion plan. Because the reason I think the committee went the direction it did is it is only required when the proposed activity causes disturbance of an area cumulatively in excess of 10,000 square feet. And then a disturbed area is an area where ground cover is destroyed or removed, leaving the land subject to accelerated erosion. So I think the committee's perspective was there's not any disturbance being proposed, it's all stabilized. And so I would just want to clarify to the applicant that compliance with soil and erosion might be providing information to the commission to conclude why
Right.
it isn't, not, more information isn't necessary.
Mr. Chairman, that is because it is an after-the-fact application, and all of that disturbance has already happened. Right?
Okay, it's stable.
It's done.
No. So now it's stable in violation. Who says it's stable?
Okay, but if you just, that was my only point is.
The precedent is just go do it, and then later on it'll be stable.
I would testify that it's stable if that means anything to you. I saw it.
So why can't we add a statement that just
Okay, we've got a motion on the table, which, I'm going to restate it so that we all sort of know. What we're doing is we're saying we accept the subcommittee's recommendation, but we want a statement on the soil and erosion control plan, and we need a,
Site plan.
I'm getting tired. A more detailed site plan.
We have to specify how it's
Right.
scaled, that's.
An updated site plan that shows things like the vegetative buffer.
I just think that you should add the word approved. Go for this.
I'm not accepting that.
You're putting roadblocks down there, buddy.
Call the question.
Constantly.
Okay,
Okay?
well, I don't know what the question is, that's why okay. We are accepting it with the exception of the site plan and the soil erosion plan. Does this mean that we're going to vote on another motion?
No, that means that we're asking them to provide us that for the next meeting.
Well, then we need to specify what kind of site plan we want.
I think the record dictates that.
Okay, so it would be a special that conforms to our standard regulations.
Correct.
All right, that's what I wanted. So we're voting all at once on the new regular and site. Okay.
Okay.
I just, what
So
We
we're
can
good.
work with the Randy's office on getting the site plan together,
Right,
correct?
right.
So they can all work
Okay.
together and we can all be happy.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm not in favor.
Okay, opposed? Okay, no abstaining. Okay, so that's the direction we're giving? Okay. With that, since we've got material outstanding, I would recommend that we not close this public hearing, that we, I tell you, I'm tired, I can't think of the proper language right now.
Continue.
Continue, thank you.
Can I ask how much time we have left?
Well, we just opened the public hearing today, so we've got plenty of time.
35 days without an extension.
Right. So we've got time for the next.
Well, let's tell him when he has to have, when we're gonna have the next public meeting so he can bring the information.
Right. The next public hearing date is, what's the regular? Not the meeting, the public hearing will be October 1st, okay. So the motion would be, or I would accept the motion to continue this public hearing to October 1st, 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn?
Can you add a couple more things, the Department of Agriculture, if they can start this process, or is this?
No, that would be after the approval.
The other part
Did anybody
was,
second?
No, Alman's got his questions.
so the other part I wanted to understand was the first line, the second line, and the third line. They're not. I have a deep letter, they're not the same. I'll both be separate. I would like to get that definition. Is that something that our staff can help us?
Yeah, that would be something, would you be able to help us with?
Help him with the definition of the words in your regulations. Sure.
No, that's not in our regulations.
No, the words that are used in your regulations, what those words might
First
mean.
grind.
First grind, second grind, what that means.
So that definition of
Yes.
deep official.
So those three terms,
How about, those are street terms?
you said first grind, second, what exactly is first grind, second grind,
Yes,
Uh,
that
third?
is correct, because I was reading through the letters from deep, they define it, and actually they complained about.
We shouldn't get into that because it's not, the public hearing has been closed.
Right. So,
I'll talk to the staff.
but we're continuing.
Continued it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that motion was, I didn't hear it.
But there was a motion to keep going.
With your permission,
Yeah.
I'll follow up with the staff with this one.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion
Is there
to
a
adjourn?
second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Thank you.